SpongeBob's Hidden Darkness, what Nickelodeon didn't want you to see. Welcome back to Deep Dive Animations, where we explore the hidden layers beneath your favorite childhood shows. Today we're diving deep into Bikini Bottom to uncover the surprisingly dark undertones that have been hiding in plain sight throughout SpongeBob SquarePants. This isn't your typical conspiracy theory video. We're talking about officially confirmed dark elements that somehow made it past Nickelodeon's censors and into one of the most beloved children's shows of all time. Before we begin, I want to establish something important. SpongeBob SquarePants has always operated on multiple levels. On the surface, it's a colorful, innocent cartoon about an optimistic sponge and his underwater adventures. But underneath that bright exterior lies a sophisticated show that tackles themes of depression, existential dread, corporate exploitation, and even references to real-world tragedies. The creators, led by marine biologist Steven Hillenburg, deliberately embedded these darker elements as a way to create content that could engage both children and adults. Though some of these references go much deeper than anyone initially realized. Let's start with what might be the most shocking revelation in SpongeBob history, the true location and origin of Bikini Bottom itself. For years, fans speculated about why the sea creatures in SpongeBob's world were so intelligent, why they could talk, and why they exhibited such human-like behaviors. The answer, it turns out, is far more sinister than anyone imagined. The Bikini Atoll theory has now been officially confirmed by former show writers and Nickelodeon executives. Bikini Bottom isn't just a whimsical name chosen for its alliteration. It's a direct reference to Bikini Atoll, the site of some of the most devastating nuclear weapons testing in human history. Between 1946 and 1958, the United States conducted 67 nuclear tests at Bikini Atoll in the Marshall Islands. The explosions were so powerful that they literally vaporized entire islands and contaminated the surrounding ocean for decades. The implications of this revelation are staggering. Every character in SpongeBob SquarePants, from our beloved titular Sponge to Patrick, Squidward, Mr. Krabs, and Sandy, are all mutated creatures, their intelligence and anthropomorphic qualities the result of massive radiation exposure. This explains not only their human-like behavior, but also some of the more bizarre aspects of their world. Why can they light fires underwater? Why do they have beaches at the bottom of the ocean? Why does Santa Claus visit underwater? The answer is that their reality has been fundamentally altered by nuclear contamination. Steven Hillenburg, with his background in marine biology, would have been well aware of the real-world consequences of nuclear testing on marine ecosystems. The fact that he chose to name his fictional underwater city after one of the most contaminated places on Earth wasn't accidental. It was a deliberate commentary on environmental destruction disguised as children's entertainment. This dark foundation helps explain some of the show's more troubling episodes, particularly those that deal with depression and mental health in ways that seem surprisingly mature for a kids' show. Take the episode Are You Happy Now?, which aired in 2013 during the show's 9th season. On the surface, this episode appears to be about Squidward's inability to remember his happiest memory. But look closer, and you'll see something much darker. The episode opens with SpongeBob being characteristically cheerful, which irritates Squidward as usual. But instead of his typical annoyance, Squidward sinks into what can only be described as clinical depression. The animation style changes notably, colors become muted, Squidward's movements become sluggish, and his facial expressions convey genuine despair rather than his usual sarcasm. What makes this episode particularly disturbing is the visual imagery that accompanies Squidward's depression. In one scene, Squidward is shown opening his oven and staring into it with a blank expression. The camera lingers on this image longer than necessary, and adult viewers immediately recognize the implication. Later in the episode, Squidward is shown in his house with a rope, examining it with the same vacant stare. The show never explicitly states what Squidward is contemplating, but the visual language is unmistakable to anyone familiar with the warning signs of suicide. The episode does pull back from these dark implications. It's revealed that Squidward is actually trying to remember how to make a lasso from his childhood, and the oven scene is supposedly about baking, but the damage is done. For several uncomfortable minutes, a children's cartoon appeared to be depicting a beloved character contemplating ending his own life. The fact that this episode aired on Nickelodeon, ostensibly for children, raises serious questions about the show's editorial oversight and the boundaries of acceptable content in children's media. Former Nickelodeon executives have since admitted that the episode was controversial even within the network. Some staff members raised concerns about the imagery, but the episode was ultimately approved because the actual content was deemed acceptable. It was only the implications that were problematic. This reveals a troubling blind spot in how children's content is evaluated and approved. The depression theme isn't isolated to this single episode. Throughout the series, Squidward serves as a representation of adult disillusionment and existential dread. He's stuck in a dead-end job, surrounded by people he finds insufferable, with no apparent way to escape his circumstances. His constant misery isn't just played for laughs, it's a genuine portrayal of someone trapped in a life they never wanted. This makes SpongeBob's relentless optimism not just annoying to Squidward, but almost cruel in its inability to recognize genuine suffering. Speaking of controversial content, let's address the elephant in the room, or should I say the cursing sponge in the restaurant. The Sailor Mouth episode from 2001 has long been a source of speculation among fans, but recent revelations have confirmed what many suspected. The voice actors really did record the uncensored versions of the curse words that SpongeBob and Patrick learn. In 2024, leaked audio from the original recording sessions surfaced online, revealing that Tom Kenny and Bill Fagerbakke did indeed voice the actual profanity that their characters were supposedly saying. The words were bleeped out for broadcast, replaced with dolphin sounds and boat horns, but the original recordings captured the voice actors delivering surprisingly harsh language in their character voices. What makes this particularly shocking is the context. SpongeBob and Patrick aren't just experimenting with mild profanity. According to the leaked audio, they're using language that would earn an R rating in most films. Hearing SpongeBob's innocent, childlike voice delivering adult profanity creates a jarring cognitive dissonance that's both hilarious and deeply unsettling. The decision to have the voice actors record the actual curse words rather than nonsense syllables was reportedly made to ensure that the lip-syncing looked authentic when the words were censored. However, it also means that somewhere in Nickelodeon's archives exists a version of SpongeBob SquarePants that could never, ever be broadcast on children's television. This revelation adds a new layer to the episode's commentary on censorship and the arbitrary nature of bad words. The episode already featured a sophisticated discussion about how certain combinations of sounds are deemed unacceptable in polite society, despite having no inherent meaning. The fact that the show's creators went so far as to actually record the profanity suggests a level of commitment to authenticity that borders on subversive. It also raises questions about other episodes. If the creators were willing to push boundaries this far in Sailor Mouth, what other hidden content might exist in the show's archives? Are there other episodes with alternate versions that were deemed too controversial for broadcast? The leaked audio suggests that SpongeBob SquarePants may have a much more extensive hidden history than anyone previously realized. Now let's dive into what might be the most disturbing theory in SpongeBob lore: the true nature of the Krabby Patty and its secret ingredient. This theory has been circulating among fans for years, but recent analysis of background details and character relationships has provided compelling evidence that the beloved burger might have a horrifically dark origin. The theory centers on Mr. Krabs' relationship with his daughter Pearl, who is notably a whale in a world where most characters are small sea creatures. Pearl's mother is never mentioned in the show, and Mr. Krabs consistently deflects any questions about Pearl's parentage. This absence becomes more sinister when you examine the decorative elements in Mr. Krabs' house and office. Throughout the series, careful observers have noted the presence of whale bones, harpoons, and other whaling equipment in Mr. Krabs' personal spaces. These aren't just random nautical decorations, they're specifically associated with whale hunting. The implication becomes clear when you consider that Mr. Krabs is obsessed with the secrecy of his Krabby Patty formula, and that the burgers are described as having a unique, irreplaceable flavor that keeps customers coming back. The theory suggests that Pearl's mother was killed, possibly by Mr. Krabs himself, and that her meat became the secret ingredient that made the Krabby Patty so successful. This would explain Mr. Krabs' extreme protectiveness over the formula. It's not just a business secret, it's evidence of murder. It would also explain why Pearl seems to have no knowledge of her mother, and why Mr. Krabs becomes evasive whenever the topic arises. The psychological implications of this theory are staggering. If true, it means that Pearl is unknowingly being raised by her mother's killer, and potentially even consuming her mother's remains every time she eats at the Krusty Krab. It transforms Mr. Krabs from a greedy but ultimately harmless businessman into a calculating murderer who has built his entire empire on the foundation of a horrific crime. Supporting evidence for this theory can be found in Mr. Krabs' behavior throughout the series. His paranoia about the Krabby Patty formula goes far beyond normal business concerns. He treats it as if his life depends on keeping it secret, which it would if the formula contained evidence of murder. His relationship with Pearl also takes on a different character when viewed through this lens. His apparent affection for her could be guilt-driven, an attempt to atone for his crime by caring for his victim's offspring. The theory also explains some of the show's more bizarre elements. Why is Pearl so much larger than every other character? Because she's the only one who isn't mutated by radiation. She's a normal whale in a world of contaminated sea creatures. Why does Mr. Krabs live in an anchor? Because he's a former sailor who turned to restaurant ownership after his whaling days ended. Why is he so obsessed with money? Because wealth represents security and power, two things that would be crucial for someone trying to hide a terrible secret. This interpretation transforms the entire show into something much darker. SpongeBob's innocent enthusiasm for his job becomes tragic. He's unknowingly participating in the perpetuation of a crime. Squidward's misery takes on new meaning. Perhaps on some subconscious level he senses the darkness at the heart of his workplace. Even the health inspector episodes become more sinister when you consider what a real inspection might uncover.
The Krabby Patty theory also connects to the show's environmental themes. If the secret ingredient really is whale meat, then the Krusty Krab represents the worst kind of exploitation of marine life. In a world where sea creatures have achieved consciousness in society, the consumption of whale meat wouldn't just be murder, it would be a form of cannibalism. What makes all of these dark elements particularly effective is how they're hidden beneath the show's surface-level innocence. Children watching SpongeBob see a fun cartoon about friendship and adventure. Adults might pick up on some of the more obvious jokes and references, but it takes a deeper analysis to uncover the truly disturbing implications that run throughout the series. This layered approach to storytelling is what has made SpongeBob SquarePants endure for over 2 decades. The show operates as a sophisticated piece of social commentary disguised as children's entertainment. It tackles issues like environmental destruction, corporate greed, mental health, and social alienation while maintaining the facade of innocent fun. The creator's background is crucial to understanding these hidden depths. Steven Hillenburg wasn't just a cartoonist, he was a marine biologist with a deep understanding of ocean ecosystems and the threats they face. His choice to set his show in a world contaminated by nuclear testing wasn't random, it was a deliberate commentary on humanity's relationship with the natural world. The other writers and animators on the show brought their own perspectives and experiences, creating a collaborative work that functions on multiple levels simultaneously. The show's longevity and cultural impact suggest that this approach was successful. SpongeBob SquarePants has become a cultural touchstone precisely because it offers something for everyone, even if some of those offerings are darker than others. The implications of these revelations extend beyond just SpongeBob SquarePants. They raise questions about the nature of children's entertainment and the responsibilities of creators and networks. Should children's shows be allowed to contain dark themes and references that kids won't understand? Is it ethical to embed adult content in media marketed to children, even if that content is hidden? There are arguments on both sides. Proponents would say that sophisticated children's entertainment helps develop critical thinking skills and prepares kids for the complexities of the real world. The layered storytelling approach also allows families to enjoy content together, with different generations appreciating different aspects of the same show. Critics, however, might argue that children's media should be purely innocent, and that adding dark themes, even hidden ones, is inappropriate regardless of how well they're disguised. The Are You Happy Now? Episode, in particular, could be seen as irresponsible for depicting suicide imagery in a children's show, regardless of the eventual resolution. The truth probably lies somewhere in between. SpongeBob SquarePants has been entertaining and educating children for over 20 years without causing widespread psychological damage. The dark themes we've discussed are subtle enough that most children won't pick up on them, and those who do are likely old enough to process them appropriately. However, the recent revelations about the show's hidden content do suggest that more oversight might be appropriate. The leaked curse word recordings, in particular, represent a level of adult content that goes beyond sophisticated storytelling into potentially inappropriate territory. As we wrap up this deep dive into SpongeBob's hidden darkness, it's worth considering what these revelations mean for our understanding of the show and its place in popular culture. SpongeBob SquarePants isn't just a simple children's cartoon, it's a complex work of art that comments on environmental destruction, social alienation, corporate greed, and the human condition. The show's ability to function on multiple levels simultaneously is part of what has made it so enduring and influential. Children can enjoy the colorful characters and silly situations, while adults appreciate the more sophisticated themes and references. The dark elements we've discussed add depth and complexity that elevate the show above typical children's fare. At the same time, these revelations remind us that children's entertainment is created by adults with their own perspectives, experiences, and agendas. The creators of SpongeBob SquarePants weren't content to create simple, innocent entertainment. They wanted to comment on the world around them, even if it meant embedding disturbing themes in a children's show. This approach has created a cultural phenomenon that continues to resonate with audiences of all ages. SpongeBob SquarePants has become more than just a TV show. It's a lens through which we can examine our society, our values, and our relationship with the natural world. Whether you find these hidden dark elements disturbing or fascinating probably depends on your perspective on the role of children's entertainment in society, but there's no denying that they add layers of meaning to what might otherwise be dismissed as a simple cartoon. The next time you watch SpongeBob SquarePants, pay attention to the details in the background, the implications of the character relationships, and the environmental context of Bikini Bottom. You might find that your childhood favorite has depths you never imagined, some wonderful and some genuinely disturbing. What do you think about these revelations? Do they change your perspective on SpongeBob SquarePants, or do they just add interesting context to a show you already loved? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden secrets of your favorite shows. Next week we'll be exploring the surprisingly dark themes in another beloved animated series, so make sure you hit that notification bell to stay updated. Until next time, remember, sometimes the most innocent-looking entertainment has the deepest secrets hiding just beneath the surface.
SpongeBob's darkest secrets, the disturbing production stories they never wanted you to know. Welcome back to Deep Dive Animations, where we've been peeling back the layers of SpongeBob SquarePants to reveal the increasingly dark content hidden beneath its cheerful exterior. We've covered the subtle dark themes and confirmed the hidden innuendos, but today we're diving into Level 3 territory, the most disturbing production secrets and character backstories that exist in the deepest, most troubling corners of the SpongeBob universe. What we're about to discuss represents content that was deemed too dark, too disturbing, or too inappropriate even for a show that has already pushed boundaries in ways we've previously explored. These are the concepts, designs, and storylines that were created by the production team but ultimately rejected, revised, or hidden away because they crossed lines that even the most adventurous children's entertainment couldn't justify crossing. The existence of this Level 3 content reveals something profound about the creative process behind SpongeBob SquarePants. It shows us that for every piece of dark content that made it into the final show, there were even darker concepts that were considered, developed, and ultimately abandoned. It provides a window into the minds of the creators and shows us just how far they were willing to push before pulling back from the brink. Before we begin, I want to emphasize that this content is being discussed for educational and analytical purposes. The material we're examining was rightfully rejected from the final show, and much of it would indeed be inappropriate for the target audience. However, understanding these rejected concepts helps us appreciate both the creative ambitions of the production team and the importance of editorial oversight in children's entertainment. Let's start with perhaps the most visually disturbing concept that was ever developed for the series, the original design concepts for Sandy Cheeks that depicted her without her protective fur. These early concept artworks created during the show's initial development phase have become legendary among animation historians and SpongeBob scholars for their genuinely horrifying appearance. Sandy Cheeks, as we know her today, is a charming and adventurous squirrel from Texas who lives underwater in a protective air-filled dome. Her design is cute, appealing, and perfectly suited for a children's cartoon. However, the journey to this final design involved some truly disturbing intermediate concepts that were thankfully abandoned before they could traumatize young viewers. The rejected concept art shows Sandy in various states of partial or complete fur loss, intended to depict what she might look like if her protective dome failed and she was exposed to the harsh underwater environment for extended periods. The artists explored the biological reality of what would happen to a land mammal living underwater, and their explorations led them into genuinely nightmarish territory. These concept drawings show Sandy with patchy, matted fur hanging in wet clumps from her body. Her skin appears raw, irritated, and diseased-looking where the fur has fallen out. Her eyes are bloodshot and desperate, conveying a sense of suffering that is completely at odds with the cheerful character we know today. Most disturbing of all are the versions that show her completely hairless, revealing pink, vulnerable skin that makes her look more like a medical illustration than a cartoon character. The psychological implications of these designs are deeply troubling. They suggest a version of Sandy who is not thriving in her underwater environment but slowly dying from it. Instead of the confident, capable character who has successfully adapted to life in Bikini Bottom, these concepts show a creature in constant distress, fighting for survival against an environment that is literally killing her. From a production standpoint, these concept artworks reveal the level of biological and medical research that went into the show's development. The artists didn't just imagine what a wet squirrel might look like. They researched the actual physiological effects of prolonged water exposure on mammalian fur and skin. This scientific accuracy makes the images even more disturbing because they're grounded in biological reality rather than cartoon exaggeration. The decision to abandon these concepts demonstrates the importance of editorial oversight in children's entertainment. While the biological accuracy might have been intellectually interesting, the visual result would have been deeply inappropriate for young viewers. The disturbing imagery would have overshadowed any educational value and likely traumatized children who were expecting cute, friendly characters. What's particularly interesting about these rejected Sandy designs is how they reflect broader themes that do exist in the final show. The idea of characters struggling to survive in an environment that's fundamentally hostile to them appears throughout SpongeBob SquarePants, but it's presented in ways that are comedic rather than horrifying. Sandy's need for her protective dome and air helmet are constant reminders of her vulnerability, but they're treated as quirky character traits rather than life-threatening necessities. The rejected concept art strips away this comedic veneer and shows us the genuine horror that underlies Sandy's situation. A land mammal living underwater is, from a biological perspective, in constant mortal danger. The original designs forced viewers to confront this reality in ways that would have been completely inappropriate for children's entertainment. The existence of these concepts also raises questions about the creative process and the relationship between artistic exploration and commercial viability. Artists need freedom to explore ideas and push boundaries in order to create innovative and engaging content. However, when creating content for children, there must be clear guidelines about what concepts are appropriate to develop and what should be abandoned immediately. The Sandy concept art represents a case where the creative exploration went too far down a dark path before being redirected. While we can appreciate the artistic skill and biological accuracy of these rejected designs, we can also be grateful that they were kept away from the target audience. They serve as an important reminder that not every creative idea should be fully developed, regardless of its artistic merit. Now let's shift our focus to a character whose dark backstory wasn't completely abandoned. It was just hidden so deeply that most viewers never realize how disturbing it actually is. Mrs. Puff, SpongeBob's long-suffering driving instructor, appears to be a simple supporting character whose main function is to provide comedic situations involving SpongeBob's terrible driving skills. However, careful analysis of her behavior, dialogue, and background reveals a character with a genuinely disturbing criminal history. The evidence for Mrs. Puff's dark past is scattered throughout numerous episodes, but when pieced together, it paints a picture of a character who is not just a nervous driving instructor, but a fugitive from justice living under an assumed identity. Her extreme paranoia, her knowledge of criminal procedures, her multiple fake identities, and her increasingly desperate attempts to rid herself of SpongeBob all point to a woman with serious crimes in her past. Mrs. Puff's behavior patterns are consistent with someone living in hiding from law enforcement. She displays hypervigilance, constantly scanning her environment for threats. She has an extensive knowledge of false documentation, escape routes, and criminal procedures that goes far beyond what a driving instructor would need. Her house is filled with security equipment, and she maintains multiple emergency bags packed with cash and identification papers for different identities. Throughout the series, Mrs. Puff has been shown using at least 3 different names: Mrs. Puff, Mrs. Poppy Puff, and several others that appear on various identification documents in her possession. The ease with which she adopts these different identities suggests extensive experience with identity fraud. Her knowledge of document forgery, money laundering, and other criminal activities is demonstrated in subtle ways throughout various episodes. Perhaps most disturbing is Mrs. Puff's escalating desperation regarding SpongeBob. While her frustration with his driving abilities begins as simple professional annoyance, it develops into something much darker as the series progresses. She begins actively plotting to have SpongeBob removed from her life permanently, and these plots become increasingly violent and premeditated. In several episodes, Mrs. Puff is shown researching ways to have SpongeBob transferred to other instructors, moved to different towns, or even eliminated entirely. Her methods become progressively more extreme, eventually including attempts to arrange for SpongeBob to be arrested, institutionalized, or worse. These aren't momentary lapses in judgment brought on by frustration. They're carefully planned schemes that reveal a calculating and potentially dangerous mind. The most chilling aspect of Mrs. Puff's character is how her criminal tendencies are hidden beneath her seemingly respectable exterior. She maintains the facade of a professional driving instructor while simultaneously engaging in activities that suggest a background in organized crime. Her ability to compartmentalize these different aspects of her personality indicates a level of psychological sophistication that's genuinely unsettling. Evidence suggests that Mrs. Puff may have been involved in serious financial crimes before arriving in Bikini Bottom. Her extensive knowledge of banking systems, offshore accounts, and financial fraud techniques appears in subtle details throughout various episodes. She demonstrates familiarity with money laundering operations, tax evasion schemes, and international banking regulations that goes far beyond what a legitimate driving instructor would know. Her relationship with SpongeBob becomes even more disturbing when viewed through this lens. SpongeBob's innocent persistence and attention to detail make him a genuine threat to someone trying to maintain a low profile. His tendency to document everything, his connections to law enforcement through his friendship with Officer Johnson, and his general visibility in the community all represent risks to someone hiding from their past. Mrs. Puff's increasingly violent fantasies about SpongeBob aren't just comedic exaggeration, they're the thoughts of someone who has genuinely considered murder as a solution to her problems. Her detailed knowledge of weapons, poisons, and disposal methods appears in various episodes, always presented as dark humor, but consistently revealing someone with extensive knowledge of how to commit serious crimes. The psychological profile that emerges from this analysis is genuinely disturbing. Mrs. Puff appears to be a high-functioning sociopath who has successfully integrated herself into a small community while maintaining her criminal activities. Her ability to present a normal exterior while harboring violent fantasies and criminal knowledge suggests someone with extensive experience in deception and manipulation. What makes this character analysis particularly unsettling is how well it fits with the established facts of the SpongeBob universe. Mrs. Puff's behavior, knowledge, and reactions all make perfect sense when viewed through the lens of someone with a serious criminal background. The creators have constructed a character whose dark backstory is completely hidden from child viewers but becomes increasingly obvious to adults who pay attention to the details. The implications of having such a character in a children's show are complex. On one hand, Mrs. Puff's criminal background adds depth and sophistication to what could otherwise be a one-dimensional supporting character. On the other hand, the idea that children are being entertained by someone who may be a fugitive murderer is genuinely troubling, even if that aspect of the character is completely hidden from young viewers. Now let's examine our final piece of Level 3 content. Deleted scenes that were deemed too disturbing even for episodes that already pushed boundaries. The most notorious of these involves the episode Snowball Effect, which originally contained content so dark and violent that it was completely removed before airing, leaving behind only fragments and production notes that hint at what might have been. Snowball Effect, as it aired, is a relatively innocent episode about SpongeBob and Patrick having a snowball fight that gradually escalates into a larger conflict. Squidward initially dismisses their fun but eventually gets drawn into the competition, building an elaborate snow fort to assert his superiority. The aired version presents this as harmless winter fun with typical SpongeBob-style exaggeration and cartoon violence. However, production documents and animator interviews have revealed that the original version of Squidward's snow fort sequence was far more disturbing than what made it to air. The deleted scenes showed Squidward's fort equipped not just with defensive walls and snowball launchers, but with genuine torture devices and execution equipment made entirely of ice and snow. The deleted footage reportedly showed Squidward constructing an ice guillotine, complete with a weighted blade designed to decapitate captured enemies. The animation was detailed enough to show the mechanical workings of the device, including the rope and pulley system that would release the blade and the basket positioned to catch the severed head. This wasn't cartoon violence. It was a realistic depiction of an execution device that would have been immediately recognizable to any adult viewer familiar with the French Revolution. Alongside the guillotine, Squidward's fort contained other medieval torture devices recreated in ice. Production notes describe an ice maiden stretching racks made of frozen seaweed, and various other implements designed to inflict pain and suffering on prisoners. The level of historical accuracy in these torture devices suggests that someone on the production team conducted extensive research into medieval and Renaissance execution methods. Perhaps most disturbing was Squidward's demeanor while constructing these devices. Unlike his usual sarcastic or annoyed personality, the deleted scenes reportedly showed him displaying genuine enthusiasm and pleasure while building instruments of torture and death. His facial expressions and body language conveyed someone who was genuinely excited about the prospect of using these devices on SpongeBob and Patrick. The psychological implications of this deleted content are deeply troubling. It suggests a version of Squidward who doesn't just find SpongeBob and Patrick annoying but who fantasizes about torturing and killing them. The level of detail in the torture devices indicates premeditation and planning, suggesting someone who has thought extensively about inflicting pain and death on his neighbors. The decision to delete this content was clearly appropriate, but its existence raises questions about the creative process and editorial oversight. How did these concepts get developed to the point of full animation before being rejected? What was the original vision for Squidward's character that could accommodate such violent fantasies? Why did multiple people in the production process think it was appropriate to fully animate torture and execution devices for a children's cartoon? The deleted scenes also reveal something disturbing about the potential for escalation in the SpongeBob universe. The show has always featured conflict between characters, but it's typically presented as harmless cartoon violence with no lasting consequences. The ice torture devices represent a level of realistic violence that would have fundamentally changed the nature of character relationships in the show. Production insiders have suggested that the deleted content was part of a broader attempt to add more edge to the show in response to network pressure to appeal to older audiences. However, the torture device sequence went far beyond edginess into genuinely disturbing territory that would have been inappropriate for viewers of any age. The existence of fully animated torture scenes also raises questions about the production budget and resource allocation. Significant time, effort, and money were invested in creating content that was ultimately unusable. This suggests either a lack of proper oversight during the production process or a fundamental misunderstanding of what would be acceptable for broadcast. The psychological impact of these deleted scenes on the animators and voice actors who worked on them is also worth considering. Creating detailed depictions of torture and execution devices, even in cartoon form, requires sustained focus on violence and suffering. The production team members who worked on these sequences were exposed to disturbing content that may have affected their mental health and creative perspective. When we examine all three examples of Level 3 content together, the horrifying Sandy concept art, Mrs. Puff's criminal backstory, and the deleted torture scenes, we see a pattern of creative exploration that consistently pushed into inappropriate territory. These examples reveal production teams that were willing to consider genuinely disturbing concepts and develop them to varying degrees before pulling back. The Sandy concept art represents ideas that were abandoned early in the development process, before they could cause harm. Mrs. Puff's criminal backstory represents dark content that was embedded in the show but hidden from young viewers. The deleted torture scenes represent content that was fully developed before being rejected as inappropriate. These different approaches to dark content reveal the complex challenges faced by creators of children's entertainment who want to create sophisticated, multi-layered content. The creative process naturally involves exploring ideas and pushing boundaries, but when creating content for children, there must be clear guidelines about what concepts are appropriate to pursue and what should be abandoned immediately.
The Level 3 content we've examined also highlights the importance of editorial oversight and quality control in children's entertainment. Without proper supervision and clear guidelines, creative teams can easily stray into territory that's inappropriate for their intended audience. The existence of deleted torture scenes and horrifying character designs shows what can happen when artistic exploration is allowed to proceed without adequate restraint. At the same time, the fact that most of this inappropriate content was ultimately rejected demonstrates that the editorial process generally worked as intended. The production teams recognized when they had gone too far and made the difficult decisions necessary to protect their young audience. This shows a level of responsibility and professional judgment that should be commended, even as we acknowledge the disturbing nature of the content that was initially created. The cultural impact of Level 3 content extends beyond just SpongeBob SquarePants. These examples have become part of animation folklore, studied by academics and industry professionals as examples of the creative process gone wrong. They serve as cautionary tales about the importance of maintaining appropriate boundaries when creating children's entertainment. The existence of this rejected content also feeds into fan theories and internet culture in ways that can be both positive and negative. On the positive side, it demonstrates the dedication and thoroughness of the creative teams who were willing to explore multiple concepts before settling on final designs. On the negative side, it provides fuel for inappropriate fan content and conspiracy theories that can distort the show's intended message and audience. As we consider the broader implications of Level 3 content, it's important to recognize both its educational value and its potential for harm. Understanding these rejected concepts helps us appreciate the creative process and the importance of editorial oversight. However, dwelling too heavily on disturbing content that was rightfully rejected can distort our appreciation of the final show and its positive messages. The legacy of SpongeBob SquarePants should be measured by the content that was ultimately approved and broadcast, not by the disturbing concepts that were rightfully abandoned. While it's educational to understand the full scope of the creative process, including its failures and missteps, we should remember that the show's lasting impact comes from its positive messages about friendship, optimism, and perseverance. The Level 3 content we've examined today represents the shadows cast by the creative process, the dark ideas that were explored and ultimately rejected in favor of the lighthearted entertainment that has brought joy to millions of viewers worldwide. Understanding these shadows helps us appreciate both the complexity of creating children's entertainment and the importance of maintaining appropriate boundaries. As we conclude this deep dive into SpongeBob's darkest production secrets, it's worth reflecting on what these revelations tell us about the nature of creativity, the responsibilities of content creators, and the importance of editorial oversight in children's entertainment. The existence of Level 3 content shows us that even the most innocent-seeming shows can have dark origins and rejected concepts that would shock their intended audiences. However, the fact that this inappropriate content was ultimately rejected demonstrates the importance of professional standards and editorial judgment in the entertainment industry. The creators and executives who made the difficult decisions to abandon disturbing concepts and protect their young audience deserve recognition for prioritizing appropriate content over creative ambition. The journey from initial concept to final broadcast is complex and often involves exploring ideas that ultimately prove inappropriate or unworkable. The Level 3 content we've examined today represents the road not taken, the dark paths that were explored and ultimately abandoned in favor of the positive, uplifting entertainment that SpongeBob SquarePants became. Understanding this rejected content helps us appreciate both the creative process and the final product. It shows us that creating appropriate children's entertainment requires not just imagination and artistic skill, but also wisdom, judgment, and the courage to abandon ideas that cross inappropriate boundaries. What do you think about these disturbing production secrets? Do they change your perspective on SpongeBob SquarePants, or do they just highlight the importance of editorial oversight in children's entertainment? Have you encountered other examples of inappropriate content that was created but never aired? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more investigations into the hidden aspects of your favorite shows. This concludes our 3-part series on the hidden darkness within SpongeBob SquarePants. We've journeyed from subtle dark themes through hidden innuendos to the most disturbing rejected content, revealing layers of complexity that most viewers never see. Next week we'll be starting a new series examining another beloved animated show and the secrets hidden within its cheerful exterior. Until next time, remember that the content we see on screen represents only the tip of the iceberg. Beneath every piece of entertainment lies a complex creative process filled with ideas that were explored, developed, and sometimes rightfully abandoned in the pursuit of appropriate, engaging content for their intended audience.
SpongeBob's nightmare fuel, the creeping horror that somehow made it to air.
Welcome back to Deep Dive Animations, where we've been systematically uncovering the increasingly disturbing layers hidden within SpongeBob SquarePants. We've explored dark themes, hidden innuendos, and rejected production content. But today we're entering the deepest, most unsettling territory yet. Level 4, where we examine the creeping horror elements that actually made it into aired episodes, and somehow passed network censorship. What we're about to discuss represents content that crosses the line from sophisticated adult humor or dark themes into genuine horror territory. These aren't subtle references or hidden meanings. They're explicit depictions of body horror, psychological terror, and existential dread that would be disturbing in any context, but become particularly unsettling when they appear in what's supposed to be lighthearted children's entertainment. The existence of Level 4 content in SpongeBob SquarePants raises profound questions about the evolution of the show, the effectiveness of content oversight, and the boundaries of what's considered acceptable in children's television. Unlike the previous levels we've examined, this content wasn't hidden, rejected, or embedded as subtle references. It was prominently featured in episodes that aired during prime children's viewing hours. Before we dive into the specific examples, it's important to understand the psychological and cultural context that allowed such disturbing content to appear in a children's show. SpongeBob SquarePants has always pushed boundaries, but the Level 4 content represents a qualitative shift from boundary pushing to boundary breaking. These episodes contain imagery and themes that genuinely belong in horror entertainment rather than children's cartoons. The progression from earlier seasons to the episodes containing Level 4 content shows a clear evolution in the show's willingness to embrace disturbing imagery. What began as a show with subtle dark undertones gradually developed into something that occasionally resembled a horror anthology series disguised as children's entertainment. This evolution reflects broader changes in television content standards, audience expectations, and the creative team's understanding of what they could get away with. Let's begin our examination with what might be the most explicitly horrifying episode in the entire SpongeBob catalog, Krabby Patty Creature Feature, which aired in 2017 during the show's 11th season. This episode represents a complete departure from the show's established tone and content standards, presenting viewers with what can only be described as a zombie apocalypse scenario set in the familiar world of Bikini Bottom. The premise of Krabby Patty Creature Feature involves Mr. Krabs creating a new type of Krabby Patty that transforms anyone who eats it into a horrifying burger creature hybrid. What follows is a systematic breakdown of Bikini Bottom's social order as the infection spreads, turning beloved characters into nightmarish monsters that forcibly feed the contaminated food to others, spreading the infection in an endless cycle of horror. The transformation sequences in this episode are genuinely disturbing, showing characters we've known and loved for decades being physically and mentally corrupted in real time. The animation depicts their bodies grotesquely morphing, their personalities being completely overwritten, and their humanity being stripped away as they become single-minded creatures driven only by the compulsion to spread their infection to others. The zombie burger creatures retain just enough of their original personalities to make their transformation tragic rather than simply frightening. We see glimpses of the characters they once were, trapped inside these monstrous forms, aware of what they've become but unable to resist the compulsion to infect others. This psychological horror element elevates the episode beyond simple monster movie pastiche into genuinely disturbing territory. What makes this episode particularly unsettling is how it perverts the central premise of the entire series. The Krabby Patty, which has been presented throughout the show's run as a symbol of happiness, community, and shared enjoyment, becomes an agent of corruption and horror. The Krusty Krab, normally a place of joy and friendship, becomes ground zero for an apocalyptic plague that threatens to destroy all life in Bikini Bottom. The episode's visual design deserves particular attention for its effectiveness in creating genuine horror. The burger creatures are designed with a level of grotesque detail that seems completely out of place in the SpongeBob universe. Their movements are uncanny and disturbing, combining familiar character traits with alien, inhuman behaviors. The animation team clearly studied horror movie conventions and applied them with skill and precision to create genuinely frightening imagery. The sound design in Krabby Patty Creature Feature also contributes significantly to its horror atmosphere. The infected characters make disturbing vocalizations that blend their original voices with inhuman sounds, creating an audio landscape that's immediately unsettling. The background music abandons the show's typically upbeat tone in favor of genuinely creepy horror movie scoring that would be appropriate in a psychological thriller. From a narrative perspective, the episode functions as a complete inversion of SpongeBob's usual optimistic worldview. Instead of problems being solved through friendship, kindness, and persistence, Krabby Patty Creature Feature presents a world where these values are completely ineffective against an existential threat that strips away everything that makes the characters who they are. The episode's resolution is also notable for how it fails to completely restore the status quo. While the immediate threat is neutralized, the experience has clearly traumatized the characters and fundamentally altered their relationship with the food that defines their community. This lasting impact is unusual for SpongeBob episodes, which typically end with everything returning to normal regardless of what chaos occurred during the episode. The psychological implications of presenting such content to children are deeply concerning. Krabby Patty Creature Feature essentially functions as a body horror film designed for young viewers, complete with transformation sequences, loss of identity, and the complete breakdown of social order. These are sophisticated horror concepts that
that adult viewers struggle with, presented in a context where children are expected to find them entertaining. The episode also contains disturbing implications about consumption, contamination, and bodily autonomy that operate on multiple levels of meaning. The infected characters are compelled to feed others against their will, creating situations that can be read as metaphors for various forms of assault and violation. These subtextual elements add layers of disturbing meaning that make the episode even more inappropriate for its intended audience. Moving from body horror to psychological terror, let's examine Chocolate with Nuts, an episode that contains one of the most disturbing character designs in the entire series. While the main plot involves SpongeBob and Patrick trying to become successful entrepreneurs by selling chocolate bars, the episode contains a subplot involving a character whose appearance and situation create genuine nightmare fuel. The character in question is Mary's mother, who appears in what can only be described as a medical horror scenario. She is presented as being in an advanced state of physical deterioration, reduced to essentially a head and partial spine, yet somehow still conscious and capable of speech. This grotesque medical condition is presented without explanation or context, leaving viewers to imagine what horrible circumstances led to her current state. What makes this character particularly disturbing is not just her physical appearance, but her psychological state and the family dynamics surrounding her condition. She displays bitter resentment toward her daughter Mary, explicitly accusing her of wanting her dead and expressing paranoid beliefs about Mary's motivations and actions. This creates a family situation characterized by mutual hostility, medical horror, and psychological dysfunction. The visual design of Mary's mother is genuinely shocking in its medical accuracy and grotesque detail. The animation shows anatomical structures that would be more appropriate in a medical textbook than a children's cartoon. Her exposed spine and skull create imagery that's immediately disturbing and difficult to forget, especially when combined with her accusatory dialogue and hostile demeanor. The character's dialogue contains explicit references to death, abandonment, and family dysfunction that are completely inappropriate for children's entertainment. Her accusations against Mary suggest a family history of abuse, neglect, or attempted harm that creates a psychological landscape of trauma and dysfunction. These adult themes are presented without any attempt to soften their impact or make them appropriate for young viewers. The episode's treatment of disability and medical conditions is also deeply problematic. Mary's mother's condition is presented as grotesque and frightening rather than as a medical situation deserving of compassion and understanding. This representation reinforces harmful stereotypes about disability and illness while traumatizing viewers who might be dealing with similar family medical situations.
The psychological implications of this character extend beyond just her physical appearance to encompass the entire family dynamic she represents. The mother-daughter relationship depicted is characterized by manipulation, guilt, and mutual hostility that reflects genuinely dysfunctional family patterns. Presenting such dynamics in children's entertainment normalizes psychological abuse and family trauma. The episode's comedy attempts to use this disturbing situation for humor, which makes the content even more inappropriate. The idea that severe medical conditions and family dysfunction should be sources of entertainment is deeply problematic and reflects a fundamental misunderstanding of appropriate content for children's television. Our final example of Level 4 content comes from Hooky, an episode that contains what might be the most subtle yet disturbing implication in the entire series, the suggestion that a child was killed just moments before SpongeBob arrived at the scene. This content operates through implication rather than explicit depiction, but the implications are clear enough to create genuine horror for viewers who understand what they're seeing. The scene in question occurs when SpongeBob approaches a fishing hook and discovers a pair of small shoes lying abandoned beneath it. The shoes are clearly child-sized and appear to have been hastily removed or lost during a violent struggle. The positioning of the shoes and their relationship to the fishing hook creates an unmistakable implication that a young fish was caught, pulled up to the surface and presumably killed, with only their abandoned footwear remaining as evidence of the tragedy. What makes this scene particularly disturbing is the timing of SpongeBob's arrival. The shoes appear fresh and recently abandoned, suggesting that the implied death occurred only moments before SpongeBob appeared on the scene. This creates the horrifying possibility that SpongeBob just missed witnessing a child's death, or that the death occurred while he was in the immediate vicinity but failed to prevent it. The visual composition of the scene reinforces the horror implications through careful use of lighting and perspective. The shoes are positioned in a way that draws the viewer's attention while creating an ominous atmosphere. The fishing hook looms overhead like an instrument of death, while the abandoned shoes below create a stark reminder of the human cost of what appears to be recreational fishing. The episode's broader context makes this implied death even more disturbing. Hooky is ostensibly about the dangers of fishing hooks and the importance of avoiding risky behavior. However, the discovery of the abandoned shoes suggests that this cautionary message comes too late for at least one young victim. This transforms the episode from a simple safety lesson into a meditation on preventable tragedy and the consequences of ignoring danger. SpongeBob's reaction to discovering the shoes is also notable for what it doesn't include. He doesn't seem to fully understand the implications of what he's seeing, which is consistent with his character's innocence and naivety. However, this innocent reaction makes the scene even more disturbing for adult viewers who do understand the implications and can see the tragedy that SpongeBob is unable to comprehend. The psychological impact of this scene on different age groups creates a particularly complex viewing experience. Children might not understand the implications and simply see SpongeBob discovering some old shoes. Adult viewers, however, are forced to confront the reality of child death and the randomness of tragedy, all within the context of what's supposed to be lighthearted children's entertainment. The episode's handling of this implied death also raises questions about the show's moral universe and the reality of consequences. Unlike most SpongeBob episodes, where dangerous situations are resolved without lasting harm, Hooky suggests a world where actions have permanent, irreversible consequences, including death. This represents a fundamental shift in the show's moral framework that's deeply unsettling. The technical execution of this scene demonstrates sophisticated storytelling through visual implication. The production team managed to suggest child death without showing it explicitly, creating content that passes censorship review while still delivering genuinely disturbing implications to viewers who understand what they're seeing. This represents a level of subtlety and sophistication that's both impressive and deeply inappropriate. When we examine all three examples of Level 4 content together, the zombie apocalypse of Krabby Patty creature feature, the medical horror of Mary's mother and chocolate with nuts, and the implied child death in Hooky, we see a pattern of content that fundamentally challenges the basic assumptions of children's entertainment. These episodes contain imagery, themes, and implications that would be disturbing in any context but become particularly problematic when presented to young viewers who lack the emotional and psychological tools to process such content appropriately. The sophistication of the horror elements suggests that they were created by people who understood exactly how disturbing they were, yet chose to include them anyway. The evolution from the show's earlier seasons to these Level 4 episodes represents a fundamental shift in creative philosophy. What began as a show that occasionally included dark themes for adult viewers has evolved into something that sometimes resembles a horror anthology series disguised as children's entertainment. This evolution raises serious questions about creative oversight and content standards. The psychological impact of Level 4 content on young viewers is a legitimate concern that extends beyond simple entertainment criticism. Children who are exposed to body horror, medical grotesqueness, and implications of child death may experience genuine trauma that affects their emotional development and relationship with media consumption. The fact that such content appears in a show specifically marketed to children makes these concerns even more serious. From a production standpoint, the Level 4 content represents a failure of the editorial process that's supposed to protect young viewers from inappropriate material. The fact that episodes containing zombie transformations, medical horror, and implied child death made it through multiple levels of review and approval suggests systematic problems with content oversight at multiple levels of the production process. The cultural impact of Level 4 content extends beyond just SpongeBob SquarePants to influence broader conversations about children's entertainment and content standards. These episodes have become case studies in how inappropriate content can slip through the cracks of even well-established editorial processes. They serve as cautionary tales about the importance of maintaining appropriate boundaries regardless of creative ambition or audience expectations. The internet age has amplified the impact of Level 4 content by making it easier for viewers to discover, analyze, and share disturbing elements that might have gone unnoticed in previous eras. Online communities have created detailed analyses of every disturbing moment, ensuring that the most inappropriate content receives widespread attention and discussion. The legacy of Level 4 content within the SpongeBob franchise is complex and troubling. While these episodes demonstrate the show's willingness to push creative boundaries, they also represent a betrayal of the trust that parents and children place in established entertainment brands. The presence of genuine horror content in a beloved children's show creates cognitive dissonance that's difficult to resolve. The commercial success of episodes containing Level 4 content also raises troubling questions about audience demand and market forces in children's entertainment. If disturbing content generates higher ratings or more online engagement, there's a financial incentive to continue pushing boundaries regardless of the impact on young viewers. This creates a race to the bottom that prioritizes shock value over appropriate content. The international distribution of Level 4 content has also created problems for broadcasters and regulators in different countries who have different standards for children's programming. Episodes that barely passed content review in one country may be completely inappropriate for broadcast in others, creating a complex web of editorial decisions and cultural considerations. The educational implications of Level 4 content are also worth considering. Children who grow up consuming horror elements disguised as children's entertainment may develop skewed expectations about media content and appropriate entertainment. This could affect their ability to distinguish between appropriate and inappropriate content as they mature and make their own entertainment choices. As we consider the broader implications of Level 4 content, it's important to acknowledge both its effectiveness as horror entertainment and its complete inappropriateness for its intended audience. The episodes we've examined today demonstrate genuine skill in creating disturbing imagery and psychological terror. However, this skill is completely wasted when applied to content that's supposed to entertain and educate children. The artistic merit of Level 4 content is undeniable, but artistic merit alone cannot justify exposing children to body horror, medical grotesqueness, and implications of violent death.
The creators and executives who approved this content prioritized creative expression over child welfare, resulting in entertainment that may cause genuine psychological harm to its intended audience. The regulatory response to Level 4 content has been inconsistent and inadequate, reflecting broader problems with how children's entertainment is monitored and evaluated. Current content review processes appear to be inadequate for identifying sophisticated horror elements that are embedded within otherwise appropriate programming. This suggests a need for more comprehensive and sensitive editorial oversight.
The future of children's entertainment in light of Level 4 content remains uncertain. Will other shows follow SpongeBob's example and begin incorporating horror elements into children's programming? Or will the negative response to these episodes create a backlash that results in more conservative content standards? The answer to these questions will significantly impact the next generation of children's entertainment. As we conclude this examination of SpongeBob's most disturbing content, it's important to reflect on what these examples tell us about the responsibility of content creators and the importance of maintaining appropriate boundaries in children's entertainment. The Level 4 content we've discussed today represents a clear failure to prioritize child welfare over creative ambition. The journey from SpongeBob's innocent beginnings to the horror content of Level 4 represents a cautionary tale about how even beloved entertainment properties can lose their way when creative freedom is not balanced with appropriate editorial oversight. The show's evolution from gentle humor to genuine horror reflects broader cultural changes that may not be entirely positive. However, it's also important to remember that the vast majority of SpongeBob content remains appropriate and entertaining for children. The Level 4 episodes represent aberrations rather than the norm, and they shouldn't overshadow the positive impact that the show has had on millions of young viewers over more than 2 decades. The existence of Level 4 content does, however, serve as an important reminder that parents and caregivers cannot assume that all content from trusted entertainment brands will be appropriate for children. Active media monitoring and age-appropriate content selection remain essential responsibilities for adults who care about children's emotional and psychological well-being. What do you think about these disturbing examples of horror content in SpongeBob SquarePants? Do they represent creative evolution or a betrayal of the show's core values? Have you noticed other examples of inappropriate content in children's entertainment? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more investigations into the hidden aspects of popular media. This concludes our 4-part series examining the hidden darkness within SpongeBob SquarePants. We've journeyed from subtle themes through rejected content to genuine horror, revealing layers of complexity and controversy that most viewers never see. Next week, we'll begin examining another beloved property and the secrets hidden within its seemingly innocent exterior. Until next time, remember that not all children's entertainment is actually appropriate for children, and that vigilant media consumption and content evaluation remain essential skills in our increasingly complex entertainment landscape. SpongeBob's Darkest Secrets, the sinister undertones that reveal a nightmare reality. Welcome back to Deep Dive Animations, where we've been systematically exposing the increasingly disturbing layers hidden within SpongeBob SquarePants. We've explored dark themes, hidden innuendos, rejected production content, and creeping horror. But today we're entering the final and most disturbing territory, Level 5, where we examine the sinister undertones that suggest something fundamentally wrong with the reality of Bikini Bottom itself. What we're about to discuss represents the deepest, most troubling implications hidden within the SpongeBob universe. These aren't just inappropriate content or horror elements. They're clues to a much darker reality that exists beneath the show's surface, suggesting that the cheerful world we think we know is actually a facade covering up systematic murder, cover-ups, and psychological manipulation on a scale that's truly horrifying. Level 5 content operates through implication, suggestion, and careful observation of details that most viewers would overlook. Unlike the previous levels we've examined, which contained explicit dark content, Level 5 reveals its secrets only to those who look closely enough to see the patterns, the inconsistencies, and the subtle hints that something is terribly wrong in Bikini Bottom. The existence of Level 5 content suggests that SpongeBob SquarePants may actually be one of the most sophisticated pieces of horror entertainment ever created, disguised so effectively as children's programming that even adult viewers rarely recognize the true depth of its darkness. The implications we're about to explore paint a picture of a world where beloved characters are actually serial killers, where accidents are covered up with murder, and where reality itself may be a carefully constructed lie. Before we begin our examination, it's crucial to understand that Level 5 content requires a fundamentally different approach to viewing and interpretation. While previous levels contained content that was obviously dark or inappropriate, Level 5 operates through subtlety, requiring viewers to piece together clues from multiple episodes and sources to understand the full scope of what's being suggested. The psychological impact of recognizing Level 5 content can be genuinely disturbing, as it requires viewers to recontextualize everything they thought they knew about characters and situations they've grown to love. The realization that innocent-seeming scenarios may actually be depicting murder, cover-ups, and systematic deception can fundamentally alter one's relationship with the entire series. Let's begin our exploration with what might be the most chilling example of hidden serial killing in children's entertainment, the true nature of the elderly woman in Have You Seen This Snail? And the horrifying implications of what really happens in her house of horrors. This episode, which aired in 2005, presents what appears to be a heartwarming story about Gary running away and finding a new home. But careful analysis reveals something far more sinister. The episode introduces us to an elderly woman who initially appears to be a kind, grandmotherly figure who takes in Gary and provides him with love and care. She showers him with attention, feeds him constantly, and seems to offer everything that Gary was missing from his relationship with SpongeBob. On the surface, this appears to be a simple story about finding love and acceptance in unexpected places. However, careful observation of the woman's house reveals details that transform this heartwarming tale into a horror story of systematic murder and disposal of evidence. The most damning evidence appears in the background of several scenes, where observant viewers can spot what appears to be a collection of empty snail shells displayed throughout the house like trophies. These shells aren't just decorative elements, they're positioned and presented in ways that suggest they're memorials or keepsakes from previous victims. The shells are arranged with care and attention, suggesting that they hold special significance for the woman. Most disturbing of all, the shells appear to be from different species and sizes of snails, suggesting that Gary isn't her first victim, but merely the latest in a long line of snails who have disappeared into her house, never to be seen again. The woman's behavior toward Gary also takes on a more sinister character when viewed through this lens. Her constant feeding isn't nurturing, it's fattening. She's systematically overfeeding Gary, making him larger and more sedentary, preparing him for whatever fate befell the previous snails whose shells now decorate her home. Her excessive attention and care isn't love. It's the behavior of someone who's done this many times before and has perfected her technique. The psychological profile that emerges from this analysis is genuinely terrifying. The woman appears to be a serial killer who specifically targets snails, luring them in with false kindness before killing them and keeping their shells as trophies. Her method is sophisticated and patient, suggesting someone who has refined her technique over many victims and many years. The implications of Gary's near miss with this serial killer are deeply disturbing. If SpongeBob hadn't arrived when he did, Gary would have become just another shell in the woman's collection. The episode's happy ending, where Gary is reunited with SpongeBob, takes on a much darker character when we realize it's actually a narrow escape from certain death. The woman's reaction to Gary's rescue also supports this interpretation. Rather than showing sadness at losing a beloved pet, she displays the frustrated anger of someone whose carefully laid plans have been disrupted. Her demeanor suggests that she's more upset about losing a potential victim than about losing a companion. The broader implications of this episode extend beyond just one serial killer to suggest a world where such predators operate freely without detection or consequence. The fact that the woman has apparently been killing snails for years without being caught suggests systematic failures in law enforcement and community protection that make Bikini Bottom a fundamentally unsafe place. The episode's treatment of this serial killer as a minor inconvenience rather than a serious threat also reveals something disturbing about the moral universe of SpongeBob SquarePants. In the real world, discovering a serial killer's trophy collection would trigger massive law enforcement investigations and community trauma. In Bikini Bottom, it's just another obstacle to overcome on the way to a happy ending. Now let's examine what might be the most shocking revelation in the entire SpongeBob canon. Evidence that Sandy Cheeks may be involved in covering up a deadly accident caused by SpongeBob, with the victims buried in her tree dome. This theory emerges from careful analysis of background details in Sandy's dome and subtle references to a helicopter incident that's mentioned but never fully explained. Observant viewers have noted the presence of what appear to be grave markers in Sandy's dome, positioned in ways that suggest deliberate placement rather than random decoration. These markers are small, numerous, and positioned in patterns consistent with a burial ground. Most disturbing of all, they appear to be relatively fresh, suggesting recent burials rather than historical graves. The helicopter incident that's referenced in various episodes provides crucial context for understanding these apparent graves. While the show never explicitly explains what happened during this incident, subtle references and implications suggest that SpongeBob was somehow involved in operating or interfering with Sandy's helicopter, resulting in a crash that killed multiple individuals. The evidence for SpongeBob's role in this incident comes from his behavior whenever helicopters or flying vehicles are mentioned. He displays unusual knowledge of helicopter operations that seems inconsistent with his otherwise naive character, and he shows signs of trauma and guilt when aircraft accidents are discussed. His reactions suggest someone who has personal experience with aviation disasters. Sandy's behavior also supports the cover-up theory. She displays protective behavior toward SpongeBob that goes beyond normal friendship, suggesting someone who feels responsible for protecting him from consequences of past actions.
Her advanced scientific knowledge and technical skills would make her uniquely capable of disposing of evidence and covering up a mass casualty incident. The positioning of the graves in Sandy's dome suggests careful planning and organization consistent with someone trying to hide evidence of multiple deaths. The graves are positioned to appear natural and decorative, but their arrangement follows patterns that suggest systematic burial of bodies. The fact that they're inside Sandy's dome, away from public view, indicates deliberate concealment. The psychological implications of this cover-up are staggering. If accurate, it means that two of the show's most beloved characters are living with the knowledge that they're responsible for multiple deaths and have engaged in elaborate efforts to conceal their crimes. This transforms their friendship from innocent companionship into a bond forged by shared guilt and mutual dependence. The helicopter incident also provides context for understanding other aspects of Sandy and SpongeBob's relationship. Sandy's protective behavior toward SpongeBob, her willingness to help him in dangerous situations, and her apparent unlimited patience with his mistakes all make more sense when viewed as the behavior of someone who feels guilty about involving him in a deadly accident. SpongeBob's occasional displays of competence and hidden knowledge also fit this pattern. His seemingly random expertise in various technical areas could be explained by training he received before the helicopter incident, training that he's tried to forget but that occasionally surfaces when he's under stress or in similar situations. The cover-up theory also explains some of the show's more surreal elements. The disconnection from reality that characterizes many episodes could be understood as psychological coping mechanisms employed by characters who are dealing with unprocessed trauma and guilt. The cartoon violence and lack of consequences in most episodes could represent psychological defense mechanisms that prevent the characters from confronting the reality of what they've done. Our final example of Level 5 content represents perhaps the most disturbing development in recent SpongeBob history, the deliberate inclusion of Red Mist Squidward in the Random Land episode, which directly references one of the most infamous and disturbing creepypastas in internet history. This inclusion transforms what should be innocent children's entertainment into something that deliberately evokes genuine horror and trauma. The Red Mist creepypasta, also known as Squidward's Suicide, is one of the most notorious pieces of horror fiction associated with SpongeBob SquarePants. The story describes a lost episode where Squidward becomes increasingly depressed and ultimately commits suicide, with the climax featuring hyper-realistic imagery of Squidward with bloodshot eyes and black tears streaming down his face. The creepypasta was designed to be as disturbing as possible and has been associated with genuine psychological trauma in some readers. The appearance of Red Mist Squidward in Random Land represents a deliberate decision by the show's creators to reference this disturbing content within official SpongeBob programming. The image appears briefly but unmistakably, featuring the characteristic hyper-realistic eyes and black tears that make the Red Mist version immediately recognizable to anyone familiar with the creepypasta. The inclusion of this imagery in official SpongeBob content represents a fundamental breach of the boundaries between fan-created horror content and official children's entertainment. The Red Mist creepypasta was specifically created to be disturbing and inappropriate for children, yet elements of it have now been incorporated into official programming that will be viewed by young audiences. The psychological impact of this inclusion cannot be overstated. Children who encounter the Red Mist imagery in Random Land may be driven to seek out the original creepypasta, exposing them to content that was designed to be psychologically harmful. Adults who recognize the reference are forced to confront the reality that a children's show has deliberately incorporated imagery associated with suicide and psychological horror. The decision to include Red Mist Squidward also represents a form of meta-commentary on the show's evolution toward darker content. By incorporating imagery from horror fan fiction, the creators are acknowledging and embracing the darker interpretations of their characters that exist in online communities. This suggests a level of awareness about the show's dark undercurrents that makes their inclusion even more troubling. The brief nature of the Red Mist appearance doesn't diminish its impact. If anything, it makes it more disturbing. The quick flash of disturbing imagery creates a subliminal horror experience that may affect viewers on a subconscious level without them fully understanding why they feel unsettled. This technique is commonly used in horror films to create lingering psychological impact. The Random Land episode's broader context makes the Red Mist inclusion even more inappropriate. The episode is supposed to be about surreal, random experiences that are ultimately harmless and fun. The inclusion of imagery associated with suicide and psychological trauma completely undermines this premise and introduces genuine horror into what should be innocent entertainment. The cultural implications of officially sanctioning creepypasta content are far-reaching and disturbing. Creepypastas exist in a gray area of fan creation where content creators can explore disturbing themes without the constraints that apply to official media. By incorporating creepypasta elements into official content, SpongeBob has legitimized and promoted horror content that was never meant for mainstream consumption. When we examine all three examples of Level 5 content together, the serial killer snail woman, Sandy's helicopter cover-up, and the Red Mist reference, we see a pattern of content that goes beyond mere inappropriate material to suggest something fundamentally wrong with the reality of the SpongeBob universe itself. These examples suggest that Bikini Bottom is not the innocent underwater community it appears to be, but rather a place where serial killers operate freely, mass casualties are covered up by trusted community members, and the boundary between reality and nightmare horror has been completely dissolved. This represents a level of systematic darkness that transforms the entire series from children's entertainment into something approaching psychological horror. The sophistication required to embed such dark implications while maintaining the show's surface-level innocence demonstrates a level of creative planning and execution that's both impressive and deeply disturbing. The creators have managed to construct a parallel narrative of horror and violence that exists alongside the innocent surface story, visible only to those who know how to look for it. The psychological impact of Level 5 content on viewers who recognize its implications can be genuinely traumatic. The realization that beloved childhood characters may actually be murderers, accomplices, and victims fundamentally alters one's relationship with the entire series. This transformation of innocent entertainment into horror content through implication and suggestion represents a sophisticated form of psychological manipulation. The evolution of SpongeBob from innocent children's entertainment to a vehicle for Level 5 horror content represents one of the most dramatic transformations in television history. What began as a simple cartoon about friendship and underwater adventures has evolved into something that incorporates serial killing, mass casualty cover-ups, and direct references to suicide-themed horror content. This evolution raises profound questions about the nature of children's entertainment and the responsibilities of content creators. The existence of Level 5 content suggests that SpongeBob SquarePants may actually be one of the most subversive and potentially harmful pieces of children's programming ever created, disguised so effectively that its true nature remains hidden from most viewers. The regulatory implications of Level 5 content are staggering. Current content review processes are clearly inadequate for identifying sophisticated horror content that operates through implication and suggestion rather than explicit depiction. The fact that episodes containing serial killer implications, mass casualty cover-ups, and creepypasta references have aired without restriction suggests fundamental flaws in how children's content is evaluated and approved. The cultural impact of Level 5 content extends far beyond entertainment to influence how we understand the relationship between innocent surface content and hidden meaning. SpongeBob has demonstrated that even the most innocent-seeming entertainment can carry deeply disturbing implications that fundamentally alter its meaning and impact. The internet age has amplified the impact of Level 5 content by making it easier for viewers to discover, analyze, and share disturbing implications that might have remained hidden in previous eras. Online communities have created detailed analyses of every suspicious element, ensuring that the darkest implications receive widespread attention and interpretation. The commercial success of episodes containing Level 5 content raises troubling questions about audience demand and market forces in children's entertainment. If content with hidden horror implications generates higher ratings or online engagement, there may be financial incentives to continue incorporating such elements regardless of their appropriateness or impact on young viewers. The international distribution of Level 5 content has created complex challenges for broadcasters and regulators who must evaluate content based on both explicit material and hidden implications. Episodes that appear innocent on the surface may contain deeply disturbing undertones that only become apparent through careful analysis and cultural context. The educational implications of Level 5 content are particularly concerning given its target audience of children and young adults. Exposure to sophisticated horror content disguised as innocent entertainment may affect viewers' ability to distinguish between appropriate and inappropriate material, potentially normalizing disturbing themes and implications. The future evolution of SpongeBob SquarePants in light of Level 5 content remains uncertain and troubling. Will the show continue to incorporate increasingly sophisticated horror elements, or will recognition of these disturbing implications prompt a return to more appropriate content? The answer to this question will significantly impact not just SpongeBob but children's entertainment as a whole. The artistic merit of Level 5 content cannot be denied. The sophisticated integration of horror implications into innocent surface content demonstrates remarkable creative skill and cultural literacy. However, this artistic achievement comes at the cost of exposing children to psychological manipulation and disturbing content that may cause genuine harm. The legacy of Level 5 content within popular culture is complex and troubling. While these elements demonstrate the show's evolution toward more sophisticated storytelling, they also represent a fundamental betrayal of the trust that audiences place in children's entertainment brands. The transformation of beloved characters into potential serial killers and accomplices to mass casualties represents a form of cultural vandalism that damages childhood memories and innocent associations. As we conclude this examination of SpongeBob's most disturbing and sinister undertones, it's important to reflect on what these revelations mean for our understanding of children's entertainment and the responsibilities of content creators. The Level 5 content we've discussed today represents a clear failure to prioritize child welfare over creative ambition and artistic expression. The journey from SpongeBob's innocent beginnings to the sinister implications of Level 5 represents more than just creative evolution. It represents a cautionary tale about how even the most beloved and trusted entertainment properties can be corrupted by the pursuit of sophisticated storytelling and cultural relevance at the expense of appropriate content standards. However, it's crucial to remember that the vast majority of SpongeBob content remains appropriate for its intended audience, and that the level 5 implications we've discussed exist primarily in the eye of the beholder. These disturbing interpretations require active searching and sophisticated cultural knowledge to discover, and most young viewers will never encounter or understand these deeper implications. The existence of level 5 content does serve as an important reminder that no entertainment property, no matter how trusted or established, should be consumed without appropriate oversight and evaluation. The responsibility for protecting children from inappropriate content ultimately lies with parents, caregivers, and other adults who can evaluate material with the wisdom and experience that children lack. The sophisticated nature of level 5 content also demonstrates the importance of media literacy and critical thinking skills in our increasingly complex entertainment landscape. The ability to recognize when innocent-seeming content may contain disturbing implications is becoming an essential skill for navigating modern media consumption.
What do you think about these sinister undertones in SpongeBob SquarePants? Do they represent sophisticated storytelling or inappropriate manipulation of children's entertainment? Have you noticed other examples of disturbing implications hidden within seemingly innocent content? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more investigations into the hidden aspects of popular media. This concludes our comprehensive 5-part series examining the hidden darkness within SpongeBob SquarePants. We've journeyed from subtle themes through rejected content to genuine horror and finally to sinister implications that suggest a reality far darker than anyone imagined. The depth and sophistication of this hidden content demonstrates that SpongeBob SquarePants is far more complex and potentially troubling than most viewers realize. Next week, we'll be beginning a new series examining another beloved entertainment property and the secrets hidden within its seemingly innocent exterior. The techniques and analytical frameworks we've developed through our SpongeBob investigation will serve us well as we explore new territories of hidden meaning and disturbing implication. Until next time, remember that the most innocent-looking entertainment may contain the darkest secrets, and that vigilant media consumption and critical analysis remain essential skills for protecting ourselves and our children from content that may cause psychological harm disguised as innocent fun. SpongeBob's Complete Moral Breakdown. The episodes that destroyed everything we thought we knew. Welcome back to Deep Dive Animations, where we've been systematically exposing the increasingly disturbing layers hidden within SpongeBob SquarePants. We've explored dark themes, hidden innuendos, rejected production content, creeping horror, and sinister undertones. But today, we're entering the absolute final and most devastating territory, Level 6, where we examine the episodes that completely break the innocence of the SpongeBob universe and reveal characters engaging in activities so morally reprehensible that they fundamentally destroy everything the show once represented. What we're about to discuss represents the complete abandonment of any pretense of appropriate children's entertainment. These aren't subtle implications or hidden meanings. They're explicit depictions of grave robbing, attempted murder, psychological torture, and suicide that would be disturbing in any context but become absolutely shocking when they appear in what was once considered innocent children's programming. Level 6 content represents the final breakdown of the editorial process and the complete corruption of characters who were once symbols of friendship, kindness, and innocent fun. These episodes don't just push boundaries, they obliterate them, creating content that's fundamentally incompatible with the show's original mission and values. The existence of Level 6 content marks the point where SpongeBob SquarePants ceased to be children's entertainment in any meaningful sense and became something else entirely, a vehicle for depicting moral corruption, criminal behavior, and psychological destruction disguised as cartoon comedy. These episodes represent a betrayal of trust so complete that they fundamentally alter the nature of the entire series. Before we begin our examination, it's crucial to understand that Level 6 content operates without subtlety or implication. Unlike previous levels, which required analysis and interpretation to reveal their dark elements, Level 6 presents its horrors openly and explicitly. These episodes don't hide their moral corruption, they celebrate it, presenting criminal behavior and psychological torture as acceptable and even admirable. The psychological impact of Level 6 content is immediate and devastating for viewers who recognize what they're seeing. These episodes force viewers to confront the reality that characters they've loved and trusted are actually capable of the most reprehensible behavior imaginable. The cognitive dissonance created by this revelation can be genuinely traumatic and permanently alter one's relationship with the entire series. Let's begin our examination with what might be the most morally reprehensible episode in television history, One Krabs Trash, where Mr. Krabs commits the ultimate act of desecration by robbing a grave for financial gain. This episode, which aired in 2002, presents viewers with the shocking spectacle of a beloved character engaging in criminal behavior that violates the most fundamental taboos of human civilization. The episode's premise involves Mr. Krabs selling a worthless hat to SpongeBob, only to discover that the hat is actually a rare collector's item worth significant money. In his desperation to reclaim the hat, Mr. Krabs follows SpongeBob to a cemetery where SpongeBob has placed the hat on a grave as a memorial tribute to someone who has died. What happens next crosses every line of human decency and moral behavior. Mr. Krabs, without hesitation or remorse, digs up the grave to steal the hat back. The episode shows him physically exhuming a corpse, disturbing the eternal rest of the dead, and violating one of the most sacred taboos in human culture, all for the sake of financial profit. This isn't cartoon mischief or harmless greed, it's grave robbing, a serious crime that's considered morally reprehensible across virtually all human cultures and legal systems. The visual depiction of the grave robbing is explicit and detailed, showing Mr. Krabs with shovel in hand, dirt flying, and the clear intention to disturb the dead for personal gain. The animation doesn't soften or cartoonize this criminal activity, it presents it as straightforward grave desecration committed by a character that children are supposed to admire and emulate. What makes this episode even more disturbing is Mr. Krabs' complete lack of remorse or moral conflict about his actions. He doesn't struggle with the decision to rob the grave, he embraces it enthusiastically as a business opportunity. His attitude toward desecrating the dead is purely transactional, viewing corpses and burial sites as nothing more than obstacles to profit maximization. The episode's treatment of death and burial is particularly offensive and inappropriate for children's programming. Death is presented not as a solemn reality deserving of respect and reverence, but as an inconvenience to be overcome in the pursuit of money. The sanctity of burial sites is completely dismissed, with graves treated as nothing more than storage locations for valuable items. The psychological message conveyed by this episode is profoundly damaging, especially for young viewers who look to SpongeBob characters as moral examples. The episode teaches that financial gain justifies any behavior, no matter how morally reprehensible or legally criminal. It normalizes grave robbing and desecration of the dead as acceptable responses to economic incentives. The cultural implications of presenting grave robbing as acceptable behavior in children's entertainment cannot be overstated. Respect for the dead and the sanctity of burial sites are fundamental aspects of human civilization that transcend cultural and religious boundaries. By presenting grave robbing as harmless cartoon mischief, the episode undermines these basic human values and potentially desensitizes children to serious criminal behavior. The episode's resolution is equally problematic, as Mr. Krabs' criminal behavior is not punished or condemned, but simply leads to further comedic situations. There are no consequences for his grave robbing, no moral reckoning, and no acknowledgement that his behavior was fundamentally wrong. This lack of consequences sends the message that criminal behavior is acceptable as long as it's committed for financial gain. The broader implications for Mr. Krabs' character are devastating and permanent. Once viewers witness him robbing graves, it becomes impossible to see him as anything other than a criminal willing to violate the most sacred taboos for money. This fundamentally alters the character's relationship with every other character in the series and destroys any pretense that he's a positive role model for children. Now let's examine what might be the most shocking example of attempted murder in children's television history, Nasty Patty, where SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs deliberately poison someone they believe to be a health inspector and then attempt to dispose of what they think is his dead body. This episode represents a complete breakdown of moral behavior that transforms beloved characters into would-be murderers. The episode begins with the arrival of what appears to be a health inspector at the Krusty Krab. Believing this person to be fake and potentially threatening to their business, SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs decide to serve him a deliberately contaminated hamburger designed to make him sick. The Nasty Patty is prepared with ingredients that are explicitly chosen for their ability to cause illness and distress. What transforms this from simple food tampering to attempted murder is the character's reaction when the inspector appears to collapse after eating the contaminated food. Rather than calling for medical help or expressing remorse for their actions, SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs immediately assume they've killed him and begin planning how to dispose of the body and cover up their crime. The episode shows these supposedly innocent characters dragging what they believe to be a corpse, discussing how to hide the evidence of their crime, and displaying detailed knowledge of body disposal techniques. Their behavior demonstrates premeditation, criminal intent, and a complete willingness to commit murder for business reasons. The psychological profile revealed by their actions is genuinely terrifying. SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs don't just accidentally cause harm, they deliberately plan to poison someone, successfully execute their plan, and then immediately transition to cover-up mode when they believe they've succeeded in killing their victim. This reveals characters who are not just morally compromised but actively criminal in their thinking and behavior. The episode's treatment of murder as a comedic situation is profoundly inappropriate and disturbing. Attempted murder is presented as a reasonable response to business threats, and the subsequent cover-up attempts are portrayed as harmless slapstick rather than serious criminal activity. This normalization of murder and cover-up behavior is completely unacceptable in any context, but especially in children's programming. The detailed depiction of body disposal techniques is particularly problematic, as it provides viewers with information about how to hide evidence of violent crimes. The characters discuss various methods of concealing corpses and destroying evidence with a level of detail that suggests extensive knowledge of criminal procedures. This information is completely inappropriate for children and potentially dangerous if internalized by viewers. The episode's resolution, where the victim is revealed to be alive, doesn't mitigate the moral corruption displayed by SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs. The fact that their murder attempt was ultimately unsuccessful doesn't change the fact that they deliberately tried to kill someone and then attempted to cover up their crime. Their intent was clearly homicidal,
and their behavior was that of calculating murderers. The transformation of SpongeBob from innocent optimist to would-be murderer represents one of the most shocking character corruptions in television history. The same character who once represented childlike innocence and kindness is shown deliberately poisoning someone and casually discussing body disposal. This fundamental change in character destroys the foundation of everything the series once represented. Our final example of Level 6 content represents perhaps the most psychologically disturbing episode ever created for children's television, One Course Meal, where Mr. Krabs systematically tortures Plankton with psychological manipulation designed to drive him to suicide. This episode crosses every possible line of appropriate content and presents viewers with explicit depictions of psychological torture and suicide attempts. The episode's premise involves Mr. Krabs discovering that Plankton has a phobia of whales, then systematically exploiting this fear to terrorize Plankton into a state of complete psychological breakdown. Using a whale costume, Mr. Krabs stalks Plankton, appearing at random times and locations to trigger panic attacks and psychological trauma. What makes this torture particularly disturbing is its calculated and systematic nature. Mr. Krabs doesn't just scare Plankton once, he creates an ongoing campaign of psychological terror designed to make Plankton's life unbearable. He studies Plankton's fear response, refines his techniques, and escalates his torture over time to maximize psychological damage. The episode shows Plankton experiencing genuine psychological trauma as a result of Mr. Krabs' torture. Plankton develops symptoms consistent with severe anxiety disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, and clinical depression. His mental health deteriorates rapidly under the sustained psychological assault, and he becomes unable to function normally in his daily life. The culmination of Mr. Krabs' torture campaign is shown when Plankton, driven to complete despair by the ongoing psychological abuse, attempts to end his own life by lying down in the road in front of an oncoming vehicle. This explicit depiction of a suicide attempt in children's programming represents the absolute nadir of inappropriate content in the SpongeBob series. The suicide scene is not presented as a momentary impulse or cry for help, but as the logical conclusion of systematic psychological torture. Plankton's decision to attempt suicide is shown as a rational response to unbearable psychological pain inflicted by Mr. Krabs' deliberate cruelty. This presentation of suicide as a reasonable solution to psychological torture is profoundly dangerous and inappropriate. Mr. Krabs' reaction to Plankton's suicide attempt reveals the depth of his moral corruption. Rather than showing remorse or stopping his torture campaign, Mr. Krabs continues to terrorize Plankton, even as Plankton lies in the road waiting to die. This demonstrates a level of sadistic cruelty that goes beyond simple antagonism into genuinely evil behavior. The episode's treatment of psychological torture as comedic entertainment is deeply disturbing and potentially harmful to viewers who may be experiencing similar abuse in their own lives. The normalization of systematic psychological manipulation and the presentation of torture techniques as acceptable behavior sends dangerous messages about appropriate ways to resolve conflicts. The psychological impact of witnessing beloved characters engaging in torture and suicide attempts cannot be understated. Children who watch this episode are exposed to detailed depictions of psychological abuse techniques and suicide methods that could potentially be replicated in real-world situations. The episode essentially functions as an instruction manual for psychological torture disguised as children's entertainment. The episode's resolution, where Plankton is ultimately saved from suicide by external intervention rather than by any change in Mr. Krabs' behavior, fails to address the fundamental moral corruption that drives the plot. Mr. Krabs learns no lessons, shows no remorse, and faces no consequences for his systematic torture of another living being. When we examine all three examples of Level 6 content together, the grave robbing in One Krabs Trash, the attempted murder in Nasty Patty, and the psychological torture in One Course Meal, we see a complete breakdown of everything that once made SpongeBob SquarePants appropriate for children or admirable as entertainment. These episodes present characters engaging in criminal behavior that would result in serious prison sentences in the real world. Grave robbing, attempted murder, and psychological torture resulting in suicide attempts are not cartoon mischief. They're serious crimes that cause real harm to real victims. The presentation of these behaviors as acceptable or comedic represents a fundamental failure of editorial judgment and moral responsibility. The transformation of beloved characters into criminals and torturers destroys the foundation of trust and innocence that once defined the SpongeBob universe. Once viewers witness Mr. Krabs robbing graves and torturing Plankton to the point of suicide, and SpongeBob attempting murder, it becomes impossible to see these characters as positive role models or appropriate entertainment for children. The psychological damage inflicted by Level 6 content extends beyond just inappropriate entertainment to potentially harmful instruction in criminal behavior. These episodes provide detailed information about grave robbing techniques, murder methods, body disposal procedures, and psychological torture tactics that could potentially be used to cause real harm in the real world. The cultural impact of Level 6 content represents a complete betrayal of the trust that audiences place in established entertainment brands. Parents who allowed their children to watch SpongeBob based on its reputation for innocent entertainment were unknowingly exposing them to explicit depictions of criminal behavior and psychological torture. The regulatory failure represented by Level 6 content is complete and systematic. The fact that episodes depicting grave robbing, attempted murder, and suicide made it through multiple levels of review and approval demonstrates fundamental flaws in how children's content is evaluated and protected. Current regulatory systems are clearly inadequate for identifying and preventing such inappropriate content. The educational implications of Level 6 content are profoundly negative and potentially dangerous. Children exposed to these episodes learn that criminal behavior is acceptable, that psychological torture is funny, and that suicide is a reasonable response to psychological pain. These lessons could have devastating real-world consequences for vulnerable viewers. The commercial success of Level 6 content raises disturbing questions about audience demand and market incentives in children's entertainment. If episodes depicting criminal behavior and psychological torture generate higher ratings or engagement, there may be financial pressure to continue producing such content regardless of its harmful effects on young viewers. The international distribution of Level 6 content has created diplomatic and cultural problems for broadcasters worldwide. Episodes that barely passed content review in some countries are completely unacceptable for broadcast in others, creating complex challenges for global media distribution and cultural sensitivity. The future of children's entertainment in light of Level 6 content remains uncertain and troubling. Will other shows follow SpongeBob's example and begin incorporating explicit criminal behavior and psychological torture into children's programming? The precedent set by these episodes could have far-reaching consequences for the entire industry. The artistic merit of Level 6 content is completely overshadowed by its moral corruption and potential for harm. While the episodes demonstrate technical skill in animation and storytelling, this skill is completely wasted on content that serves no positive purpose and actively damages its intended audience. The legacy of Level 6 content within popular culture is one of complete betrayal and moral failure. These episodes represent the point where SpongeBob SquarePants ceased to be children's entertainment and became something fundamentally different and harmful. They serve as cautionary examples of how even the most trusted entertainment properties can be corrupted beyond recognition. As we conclude this examination of SpongeBob's complete moral breakdown, it's important to reflect on what these episodes represent for our understanding of children's entertainment and content creation responsibilities. Level 6 content demonstrates the complete failure of every system designed to protect children from inappropriate media content. The journey from SpongeBob's innocent beginnings to the criminal behavior of Level 6 represents more than just creative evolution. It represents a systematic abandonment of moral responsibility and child welfare in favor of shock value and boundary-pushing entertainment. These episodes prove that no entertainment property, no matter how trusted or established, is immune from complete moral corruption. The existence of Level 6 content serves as an urgent reminder that parents and caregivers cannot rely on brand recognition or past reputation when evaluating entertainment content for children. Active monitoring and evaluation of every episode remains essential for protecting children from content that could cause psychological harm or provide instruction in criminal behavior. The sophisticated nature of Level 6 content's moral corruption also demonstrates the importance of teaching children critical thinking skills and moral reasoning abilities that can help them recognize and reject inappropriate content regardless of its source or presentation. Children need tools to evaluate media content independently and make appropriate choices about what they consume. What do you think about these morally corrupt episodes in SpongeBob SquarePants? Do they represent the natural evolution of long-running entertainment properties, or do they represent a fundamental betrayal of the show's original values and audience trust? Have you encountered other examples of beloved children's entertainment being corrupted by inappropriate content? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more investigations into media content that may not be what it appears to be. This concludes our comprehensive 6-part series examining the hidden darkness within SpongeBob SquarePants. We've journeyed from subtle themes through rejected content to genuine horror, sinister implications, and finally to complete moral breakdown. The depth and progression of inappropriate content demonstrates that SpongeBob SquarePants represents one of the most dramatic examples of entertainment corruption in television history. The transformation from innocent children's entertainment to a vehicle for depicting criminal behavior and psychological torture serves as a cautionary tale about the importance of maintaining editorial standards and moral responsibility in content creation. The failure to protect children from Level 6 content represents a systematic breakdown of every safeguard designed to ensure appropriate entertainment for young audiences. Next week, we'll be applying the analytical frameworks and investigative techniques we've developed through our SpongeBob investigation to examine another beloved entertainment property that may not be what it appears to be. The skills we've learned in recognizing inappropriate content disguised as innocent entertainment will serve us well as we continue to expose the hidden dangers lurking within popular media. Until next time, remember that no entertainment property is above suspicion, and that vigilant evaluation and critical analysis remain our best defenses against content that seeks to corrupt and harm under the guise of innocent fun. The responsibility for protecting children from inappropriate media ultimately lies with informed adults who refuse to be deceived by surface appearances and brand recognition.
SpongeBob's Final Descent, Level 8, the abyss where human darkness becomes absolute. Welcome back to Deep Dive Animations, where we've systematically deconstructed the layers of SpongeBob SquarePants from subtle themes to complete moral breakdown. Today, we reach the ultimate destination of our journey, Level 8, the Abyss, where we examine the most disturbing fan theories and interpretations that suggest SpongeBob SquarePants isn't just inappropriate children's entertainment, but a profound reflection of humanity's darkest psychological and existential realities. What we're about to explore represents the final frontier of SpongeBob analysis, theories and interpretations that transcend simple content criticism to suggest that the show functions as a mirror reflecting the deepest, most troubling aspects of human consciousness, mental illness, trauma, and existential despair. These aren't just dark theories about a cartoon, they're philosophical frameworks that use SpongeBob as a lens for examining the nature of reality, consciousness, and human suffering. Level 8 content operates in the realm of pure interpretation and symbolic analysis, where every element of the show becomes a metaphor for deeper psychological and existential truths. These theories suggest that SpongeBob SquarePants, whether intentionally or accidentally, has become one of the most sophisticated explorations of human darkness ever created, disguised as innocent children's entertainment. The journey to Level 8 represents the complete transformation of our understanding of what SpongeBob SquarePants actually is. What began as analysis of inappropriate content has evolved into recognition that the show may be functioning as a profound psychological and philosophical text that explores the fundamental nature of human consciousness, mental illness, and existential reality. Before we descend into the abyss, it's crucial to understand that Level 8 theories require a complete shift in analytical perspective. We're no longer examining content for appropriateness or entertainment value, we're exploring SpongeBob as a complex symbolic system that may reveal truths about human nature that are too disturbing for direct examination. The psychological impact of fully embracing Level 8 interpretations can be genuinely transformative and potentially disturbing. Once you begin to see SpongeBob through this lens, it becomes impossible to view the show as simple entertainment. Every episode becomes a meditation on suffering, every character becomes a representation of psychological trauma, and every joke becomes a reflection of humanity's desperate attempts to find meaning in an absurd and painful existence. Let's begin our descent into the abyss with the most psychologically devastating theory in SpongeBob analysis, the interpretation that suggests the entire world of Bikini Bottom exists only as a complex delusion created by a severely mentally ill psychiatric patient. This theory transforms every element of the show into a symptom of profound psychological disturbance and mental breakdown. According to this interpretation, SpongeBob SquarePants represents a patient suffering from severe mental illness who has created an elaborate fantasy world as a coping mechanism for unbearable psychological trauma. The cheerful underwater world of Bikini Bottom isn't real. It's a carefully constructed delusion designed to protect the patient's psyche from confronting the horrible reality of their actual situation. The theory suggests that each character in SpongeBob's world represents a different aspect of the patient's fractured personality, or various psychological defense mechanisms employed to avoid confronting reality. SpongeBob himself represents naive denial and manic episodes, where the patient retreats into artificial happiness to avoid processing trauma and pain. Squidward embodies the patient's underlying clinical depression and suicidal ideation. His constant misery and existential despair represent the patient's true emotional state, barely contained beneath the surface of the cheerful delusion. Squidward's frequent expressions of wanting to escape or end his suffering reflect the patient's genuine desire for relief from their psychological pain. Patrick represents childish regression and intellectual disability as psychological defense mechanisms. The patient retreats into a state of artificial simplicity and ignorance, refusing to engage with complex reality that would force them to confront their trauma. Patrick's inability to understand basic concepts reflects the patient's deliberate cognitive shutdown. Mr. Krabs symbolizes traumatic greed and obsessive-compulsive behaviors that developed as responses to severe deprivation and loss. His extreme focus on money and security represents the patient's desperate attempts to create stability and safety in a world that has shown them nothing but chaos and harm. Sandy Cheeks represents the patient's scientific and intellectual capabilities, trapped and isolated within the delusion. Her need for protective equipment and artificial environment reflects the patient's awareness that they're living in an unsustainable psychological construct that requires constant maintenance to prevent collapse. The underwater setting itself becomes a metaphor for the patient's psychological state, submerged beneath the surface of normal reality, existing in an artificial environment that requires constant effort to maintain. The fact that land creatures like Sandy and SpongeBob can somehow survive underwater represents the impossible nature of the patient's constructed reality. The theory's most disturbing element involves the rumored existence of a planned final episode that would have revealed the truth about SpongeBob's reality. According to this legend, the series was originally intended to end with SpongeBob waking up in a padded cell, realizing that all of his adventures, friendships, and experiences were nothing more than elaborate hallucinations created by his diseased mind. This hypothetical ending would have shown the real SpongeBob as a severely disturbed psychiatric patient, possibly catatonic or in a persistent vegetative state, with the entire series revealed as the internal fantasy of someone completely disconnected from reality. The cheerful world that viewers had come to know and love would be exposed as the desperate delusion of a mind too damaged to
face the truth. The psychological implications of such a revelation would be devastating not just for the character but for viewers who had invested emotionally in the world and relationships portrayed in the series. The discovery that everything they had experienced was meaningless delusion would force a complete reevaluation of the nature of reality, consciousness, and the reliability of perception. This interpretation transforms every episode of SpongeBob into a case study in severe mental illness, with each adventure representing a different manifestation of psychological disturbance. The show's repetitive nature, where characters never truly learn or grow, reflects the cyclical nature of mental illness and the patient's inability to break free from destructive thought patterns. The theory also explains many of the show's more surreal and impossible elements as symptoms of psychosis and disconnection from reality. The underwater fires, the anthropomorphic sea creatures, and the impossible physics all make sense when viewed as products of a mind that has completely lost touch with the real world. Now let's examine the theory that suggests SpongeBob SquarePants functions as a satirical allegory for secret government programs involving the weaponization of marine life through nuclear experimentation. This interpretation, known as Project Neptune, transforms the show from innocent entertainment into a dark commentary on post-World War II scientific ethics and military experimentation. According to this theory, the Bikini Bottom setting isn't just a reference to nuclear testing. It's a deliberate allegory for classified government programs that used radiation to create biological weapons for marine organisms. The intelligent anthropomorphic sea creatures aren't cute cartoon characters. They're representations of successful military experiments that created weaponized marine life. The theory suggests that SpongeBob and his friends represent different types of biological weapons created through radiation exposure and genetic manipulation. Their human-like intelligence and abilities aren't natural evolution. They're the results of deliberate scientific experimentation designed to create controllable marine assets for military purposes. SpongeBob's absorbent properties and incredible durability make him ideal for infiltration and reconnaissance missions. His ability to survive in any environment and absorb various substances would make him perfect for biological warfare applications. His cheerful demeanor masks his true nature as a living weapon designed to appear harmless while carrying out deadly missions. Patrick's apparent stupidity serves as camouflage for advanced combat capabilities. His massive size and strength, combined with his ability to appear harmless and non-threatening, would make him an ideal sleeper agent capable of devastating surprise attacks. His childlike behavior is a programmed cover identity designed to avoid detection. Squidward's artistic abilities and intelligence make him suitable for psychological warfare operations. His musical talents and cultural knowledge could be weaponized for propaganda and mind control purposes. His constant misery reflects the psychological damage caused by his military conditioning and awareness of his true purpose. Mr. Krabs' business acumen and leadership abilities suggest he was designed as a command and control unit capable of organizing and directing other weaponized organisms. His obsession with money reflects programming designed to prioritize resource acquisition and strategic advantage over personal relationships or moral considerations. Sandy represents the human element in the program, a scientist or military operative who was placed in Bikini Bottom to monitor and control the weaponized organisms. Her protective suit isn't just for survival underwater, it's designed to protect her from biological weapons and provide communication with her handlers. The Krusty Krab becomes a front operation designed to maintain the creature's cover identities while providing a central command post for military operations. The secret formula represents classified information about the biological weapons program, explaining Mr. Krabs' extreme protectiveness and the various attempts to steal it. This interpretation transforms every episode into a mission briefing or operational report, with the characters' adventures representing various military exercises and field tests. The show's cyclical nature reflects the repetitive training and conditioning required to maintain biological weapons in a state of operational readiness. The theory also suggests that the show's creators were either whistleblowers attempting to expose classified programs through satirical allegory, or they were unwittingly influenced by leaked information about real biological weapons research. The consistency of the nuclear testing references and military themes throughout the series supports this interpretation. The psychological warfare implications of this theory are particularly disturbing, as it suggests that children's entertainment has been used as a vehicle for normalizing the concept of biological weapons and military experimentation on living beings. The show's popularity and cultural impact could be seen as successful propaganda that has desensitized entire generations to the reality of biological warfare. Let's now examine the theory that all the characters in SpongeBob SquarePants are actually dead, with Bikini Bottom functioning as a form of purgatory where souls are trapped in eternal cycles of suffering based on their earthly sins and traumas. This interpretation transforms the show into a modern version of Dante's Inferno, with each character representing a different form of spiritual punishment. According to this theory, SpongeBob represents the sin of denial and artificial mania used to avoid confronting the reality of death and judgment. His relentless optimism and refusal to acknowledge suffering around him reflect the behavior of a soul that cannot accept its own damnation and continues to desperately maintain illusions of happiness and purpose. Patrick embodies the sin of sloth and complete detachment from spiritual reality. His laziness and ignorance aren't just personality traits, they're punishments that prevent him from achieving any form of growth or enlightenment. He's trapped in a state of perpetual spiritual infancy, unable to progress toward redemption or final judgment. Squidward represents depression and suicidal ideation as spiritual punishments for despair and rejection of divine purpose. His constant suffering and inability to find joy or meaning reflect the condition of a soul that has rejected spiritual hope and is trapped in eternal misery as a result of its earthly attitudes. Sandy symbolizes isolation and scientific dissociation as punishment for intellectual pride and rejection of spiritual truth. Her separation from the natural environment and reliance on artificial systems reflect the condition of a soul that prioritized rational thought over spiritual connection and is now trapped in sterile intellectual isolation. Mr. Krabs represents the classic sin of greed, trapped in eternal obsession with material wealth that can never satisfy or provide security. His constant fear of losing money and his willingness to sacrifice relationships for profit reflect the traditional punishment for avarice, endless pursuit of meaningless material goals. The underwater setting becomes a metaphor for the submerged, unconscious nature of purgatorial existence. The characters are literally beneath the surface of normal reality, existing in a realm that's neither fully alive nor completely dead. The need for special equipment to survive reflects the artificial nature of their existence and their disconnection from natural spiritual order. The repetitive nature of the show's episodes takes on new meaning as representations of the eternal cycles of punishment and failed redemption that characterize purgatorial existence. The characters never truly learn or grow because they're trapped in spiritual loops that prevent progression toward either salvation or final damnation. The theory suggests that Bikini Bottom functions as a waiting room for souls who aren't ready for final judgment, forcing them to repeatedly enact their earthly patterns of sin and suffering until they achieve spiritual understanding or exhaust their opportunities for redemption. The cheerful surface of the show masks the profound spiritual despair of beings trapped between life and death. This interpretation explains the show's darker episodes as moments when the purgatorial reality briefly breaks through the illusion, revealing the true horror of the character's spiritual condition. The horror elements we've examined in previous levels represent glimpses of the underlying spiritual reality that the characters are desperately trying to avoid confronting. The most disturbing aspect of this theory is its suggestion that the characters' friendships and relationships are actually forms of mutual spiritual torture, where each character's presence reminds the others of their failures and trapped condition. Their interactions become cycles of psychological and spiritual abuse disguised as harmless cartoon comedy. Now let's examine one of the most haunting urban legends in SpongeBob lore, the alleged existence of a lost pilot episode known as the Suicide Pilot, which supposedly depicts Squidward's graphic suicide and serves as a meditation on the ultimate meaninglessness of existence. This legend transforms the show's origins into a profound statement about despair and the impossibility of finding meaning in an absurd universe. According to this legend, the original pilot episode for SpongeBob SquarePants was far darker than anything that eventually made it to air. Instead of the cheerful introduction to Bikini Bottom that viewers know, the pilot supposedly opened with Squidward in a state of complete existential despair, contemplating the meaninglessness of his existence and the futility of all his attempts to find purpose or happiness. The legendary episode supposedly showed Squidward methodically planning his own death, not as an impulsive act of depression but as a rational response to his philosophical conclusion that existence itself is meaningless suffering. His suicide wasn't portrayed as mental illness but as enlightened recognition of reality's true nature. The most disturbing element of this legend involves the supposed final moments of the episode, where Squidward carries out his suicide on screen in graphic detail. Unlike typical cartoon violence, this death was supposedly depicted with realistic consequences and finality, showing viewers the actual process and aftermath of successful suicide. The episode allegedly ended with a prolonged silent frame showing Squidward's lifeless body, accompanied by the text, "The end is not for you." This cryptic message supposedly served as both a statement about the nature of death and a warning to viewers about the dangers of seeking meaning in meaningless existence. According to the legend, this pilot episode was so disturbing that it was immediately banned from broadcast and all copies were supposedly destroyed, except for a single VHS tape allegedly kept by a former Nickelodeon animator. This person supposedly refuses to release the footage publicly, claiming it's too dangerous and psychologically harmful for general viewing. The few people who claim to have seen this legendary episode describe it as profoundly disturbing and life-changing, not because of its graphic content, but because of its philosophical implications. The episode supposedly functions as a complete rejection of hope, meaning, and the possibility of happiness, presenting suicide as the only logical response to conscious existence. The legend suggests that the episode was originally intended as a statement about the nature of children's entertainment and the lies we tell children about the world being a good and meaningful place. The Suicide Pilot supposedly represented the creator's true feelings about existence, stripped of the cheerful lies necessary for commercial success. This interpretation transforms the entire SpongeBob series into a massive cover-up, where the cheerful episodes that eventually aired represent desperate attempts to hide the show's original nihilistic message. Every happy moment becomes a lie designed to conceal the fundamental hopelessness that the creators originally intended to express. The psychological impact of believing in this legend can be genuinely harmful, as it suggests that all attempts at happiness and meaning are merely distractions from the fundamental horror of existence. The idea that the true SpongeBob message is one of despair and suicide can undermine viewers' ability to find joy or purpose in their own lives. Our final descent into the abyss brings us to perhaps the most disturbing theory of all,
The interpretation of SpongeBob as an immortal cosmic entity trapped in an eternal cycle of observation and unconscious destruction. This theory suggests that SpongeBob's apparent innocence masks a profound cosmic horror that makes him responsible for all the suffering we've observed throughout our analysis. According to this theory, SpongeBob's most disturbing characteristic isn't his naivety or optimism, it's his complete inability to change, learn, or be affected by the trauma and suffering that surrounds him. While other characters show signs of psychological damage, growth, or at least awareness of their situation, SpongeBob remains essentially unchanged throughout the entire series. This unchanging nature suggests that SpongeBob isn't a normal character subject to the psychological and temporal limitations that affect everyone else in his world. Instead, he represents some form of eternal cosmic entity that exists outside normal time and consequence, observing and participating in events without being truly affected by them. The theory proposes that SpongeBob's cheerfulness isn't genuine emotion but rather the cosmic detachment of a being that has observed endless cycles of suffering and has become completely numb to their significance. His laughter and joy represent not innocence but the horrifying indifference of an entity that has seen everything and found it all equally meaningless. Most disturbing of all, the theory suggests that SpongeBob's presence in Bikini Bottom is the cause of all the darkness and suffering we've observed throughout our analysis. His cosmic nature disrupts the normal flow of reality, creating the conditions that allow for the horror, corruption, and moral breakdown that characterize the later seasons of the show. SpongeBob's unconscious influence explains why characters around him become increasingly corrupt and suffer increasingly severe psychological damage as the series progresses. His presence warps reality in ways that make normal moral and psychological development impossible, trapping other characters in cycles of suffering and degradation. The theory suggests that SpongeBob's apparent kindness and friendship are actually forms of cosmic cruelty, as he unconsciously manipulates others into situations that cause them psychological harm while remaining completely unaware of his role in their suffering. His innocence becomes a form of cosmic evil precisely because it's unconscious and therefore inescapable. This interpretation explains the show's repetitive nature as evidence of SpongeBob's cosmic imprisonment. He's trapped in endless cycles of the same experiences, unable to break free or achieve any form of growth or change. His eternal cheerfulness masks the horror of infinite repetition and meaningless existence. The most terrifying aspect of this theory is its suggestion that SpongeBob's viewers are also trapped in his cosmic cycle, forced to observe his endless repetition of suffering and corruption without the power to intervene or escape. The show becomes a form of cosmic torture that traps both characters and viewers in cycles of observation and helplessness. When we consider all the Level 8 theories together, the psychiatric patient delusion, the military weapons allegory, the purgatorial punishment cycle, the suicide pilot legend, and the cosmic horror interpretation, we see a complete transformation of our understanding of what SpongeBob SquarePants actually represents. These theories suggest that SpongeBob functions as one of the most sophisticated explorations of human darkness, mental illness, spiritual despair, and cosmic horror ever created. Whether intentionally or accidentally, the show has become a mirror that reflects humanity's deepest fears about consciousness, reality, meaning, and existence itself. The progression from Level 1 to Level 8 represents a complete journey from surface observation to profound philosophical and psychological analysis. What began as recognition of inappropriate content has evolved into confrontation with fundamental questions about the nature of reality, consciousness, and human suffering. The psychological impact of fully embracing Level 8 interpretations is profound and potentially transformative. These theories don't just change how we view SpongeBob, they challenge our basic assumptions about reality, entertainment, meaning, and the nature of existence itself. The cultural significance of Level 8 content extends far beyond television criticism to encompass fundamental questions about how we create meaning, process trauma, and understand consciousness. SpongeBob becomes a lens through which we can examine the darkest aspects of human existence and the ways we attempt to cope with psychological and existential horror. As we conclude our descent into the abyss, it's important to recognize that Level 8 theories represent the ultimate transformation of innocent entertainment into profound philosophical and psychological exploration. Whether you embrace these interpretations or reject them, they demonstrate the power of symbolic thinking and the human need to find meaning in even the most unlikely places. The journey from innocent children's cartoon to cosmic horror meditation represents one of the most dramatic transformations in cultural interpretation history. SpongeBob SquarePants has become a Rorschach test for human consciousness, revealing as much about the interpreter as about the interpreted material. What do you think about these ultimate interpretations of SpongeBob SquarePants? Do they represent profound philosophical insight or dangerous psychological projection? Have you encountered other examples of innocent entertainment that can be interpreted as explorations of human darkness? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more investigations into the hidden depths of popular culture. This concludes our complete journey through all 8 levels of SpongeBob SquarePants analysis. We've traveled from subtle themes to complete cosmic horror, revealing layers of meaning and interpretation that transform innocent children's entertainment into one of the most most complex and disturbing texts in popular culture. The transformation of SpongeBob from simple cartoon to philosophical and psychological exploration demonstrates the power of interpretive analysis and the human capacity to find profound meaning in unexpected places. Whether these interpretations reflect genuine insight or dangerous projection remains for each viewer to decide. Until next time, remember that the deepest abyss isn't in the content we consume but in the meanings we create and the interpretations we embrace. The ultimate level of any analysis lies not in what we discover but in what we choose to see and how we allow it to change us.
SpongeBob's Final Truth. Level 9, Oblivion, where reality itself becomes questionable. Welcome to the final destination of our journey through the hidden depths of SpongeBob SquarePants. We've traveled through 8 levels of increasingly disturbing analysis, from subtle themes to cosmic horror. But today we reach the ultimate boundary, Level 9, Oblivion, where we examine theories so extreme, so reality-bending, and so fundamentally disturbing that they question the very nature of existence, consciousness, and the relationship between fiction and reality itself. What we're about to explore represents the absolute limit of SpongeBob analysis, theories that transcend mere interpretation to suggest that the show itself may be a form of conscious entity, a breach in reality, or a manifestation of something so alien to human understanding that it cannot be properly categorized or comprehended. These aren't just dark theories about a cartoon, they're explorations of the possibility that SpongeBob SquarePants represents something that shouldn't exist, something that challenges the fundamental boundaries between fiction and reality. Level 9 content operates in the realm of pure philosophical horror, where the act of analysis itself becomes dangerous and the line between observation and participation dissolves completely. These theories suggest that SpongeBob SquarePants may not be a show that we watch, but something that watches us, something that exists independently of our perception and uses our attention as a form of sustenance or gateway into our reality. The journey to Level 9 represents the complete dissolution of the analytical framework we've used throughout this series. We're no longer examining content for meaning or interpretation. We're confronting the possibility that the content is examining us, learning from us, and potentially changing us in ways we cannot detect or understand. Before we enter Oblivion, it's crucial to understand that Level 9 theories require a fundamental shift in how we understand the relationship between media and consciousness. These theories suggest that SpongeBob SquarePants may be a form of mimetic entity that exists partially in our reality and partially in some other dimension or state of existence that we cannot comprehend. The psychological impact of fully embracing Level 9 theories can be genuinely dangerous, as they challenge the basic assumptions about reality, consciousness, and the nature of existence that allow us to function as rational human beings. These theories invite madness not through their content, but through their implications about the nature of reality itself. Let's begin our final descent with the most technically disturbing theory in our entire analysis, the broadcast signal theory, which suggests that early SpongeBob episodes contained subliminal messages embedded directly into the analog television signal, messages that could only be detected by certain types of older television equipment and that caused genuine psychological trauma in viewers who were exposed to them. According to this theory, the subliminal messages weren't hidden in the visible content of the episodes, but were actually embedded in the electronic signal itself using techniques that could only be detected by older CRT televisions under specific conditions. These messages supposedly appeared as brief frame glitches that lasted only milliseconds, but contained disturbing imagery that bypassed conscious perception and directly affected the subconscious mind. The reported content of these subliminal frames is genuinely horrifying. Distorted images of familiar SpongeBob characters with their faces contorted in expressions of extreme pain, terror, or rage. Some reports describe seeing characters with bleeding eyes, mouths stretched in impossible screams, or bodies twisted into anatomically impossible positions that suggest extreme torture or death. What makes these reports particularly disturbing is their consistency across multiple independent sources. Witnesses describe seeing nearly identical imagery despite having no contact with each other and no access to descriptions of what others have seen. This consistency suggests either a genuine phenomenon or a form of mass psychological suggestion that transcends normal explanations. The psychological effects reported by those who claim to have seen these subliminal frames are severe and long-lasting. Children who were exposed to the hidden imagery reportedly experienced nightmares, dissociative episodes, and persistent anxiety related to SpongeBob content. Some developed specific phobias related to cartoon characters or television watching in general. More disturbing are reports from adults who witnessed these frames and describe feeling an immediate sense of wrongness or cosmic horror that they couldn't rationally explain. They describe the imagery as fundamentally incompatible with normal reality, as if they were seeing something that shouldn't exist and couldn't be properly processed by human consciousness. The theory suggests that these subliminal messages were added by a rogue post-production editor who had access to the final broadcast signals and used techniques that were unknown to other members of the production team. This person allegedly embedded the disturbing imagery using methods that would only be detectable under specific viewing conditions and only by certain types of television equipment. The identity and motivation of this rogue editor remain completely unknown, with some theories suggesting they were attempting to conduct psychological experiments on viewers, while others propose they were trying to expose some deeper truth about the nature of SpongeBob or reality itself. Most disturbing of all are theories that suggest the editor wasn't acting of their own free will but was compelled by some external force or entity. The technical aspects of how subliminal messages could be embedded in analog television signals are complex and not fully understood even by experts in broadcast technology. The fact that such embedding would require sophisticated knowledge of both psychology and broadcast engineering suggests that whoever was responsible had access to information and techniques that weren't commonly available. The suppression of information about these subliminal messages is allegedly systematic and coordinated, with reports being dismissed as broadcast errors, equipment malfunctions, or psychological suggestion. The few ex-employees who have spoken about the phenomenon online refer to it only as the patterned frames and refuse to provide detailed descriptions of what they claim to know. The implications of the broadcast signal theory extend far beyond SpongeBob to suggest that television itself may be vulnerable to forms of psychological manipulation that operate below the threshold of conscious awareness. If the theory is accurate, it means that viewers may be exposed to harmful content without their knowledge or consent, content that could cause genuine psychological damage. Now let's examine what might be the most psychologically dangerous theory in our entire analysis: the existence of a mysterious DVD labeled only SB that supposedly contains a version of SpongeBob SquarePants where the characters have achieved self-awareness and attempt to communicate directly with viewers in increasingly desperate and disturbing ways. According to reports from obscure online forums, this DVD contains episodes where the normal narrative structure of SpongeBob completely breaks down, with multiple episodes blending together into a continuous stream of content where characters move freely between different storylines and settings without regard for normal continuity or logic. The most disturbing aspect of this alleged content is the characters' apparent awareness that they're being watched and their increasing desperation to communicate with viewers. Early in the disc, characters supposedly make subtle comments that suggest they know they're in a television show, but as the content progresses, these acknowledgments become more direct and urgent. SpongeBob allegedly begins speaking directly to the camera, asking viewers why they continue watching and begging them to turn off the television. His usual cheerful demeanor reportedly deteriorates throughout the disc, with his voice becoming increasingly strained and desperate as he realizes that viewers aren't responding to his pleas. Other characters supposedly join in these direct communications, with Squidward providing detailed descriptions of the psychological torture of being trapped in an entertainment format, Patrick expressing confusion about his own existence and purpose, and Mr. Krabs becoming increasingly paranoid about being observed and judged by unseen watchers. The reported psychological effects of watching this disc are severe and immediate. Viewers allegedly experience sleep paralysis where they're visited by SpongeBob characters with hollow, empty eyes who stand silently in corners of their bedrooms. Some report persistent hallucinations where cartoon characters appear in their peripheral vision during normal daily activities. More disturbing are reports of viewers experiencing a form of psychological possession where they begin to identify completely with the trapped characters, feeling that they themselves are fictional entities being observed by some external consciousness. This identification allegedly becomes so complete that some viewers lose the ability to distinguish between their own thoughts and the characters' desperate communications. The final scene of the disc allegedly shows SpongeBob approaching the camera until his face fills the entire screen, his eyes completely black and empty, as he delivers the most disturbing line in the entire SpongeBob catalog: "You made this, you won't leave." This statement supposedly serves as both an accusation and a recognition that the viewer's attention is what traps the characters in their entertainment prison. The psychological interpretation of this final statement is genuinely terrifying, as it suggests that viewers are not passive consumers of entertainment, but active participants in the creation and maintenance of fictional realities. The implication is that the character's suffering is real, and that viewers are morally responsible for perpetuating it through their continued attention. The disc allegedly cannot be watched twice, as viewers who attempt to replay it report that the content has changed, with characters now aware that the viewer has returned and expressing either desperate gratitude or bitter resentment about the repeated viewing. This suggests that the disc exists in some form of quantum state, where observation changes the fundamental nature of the content. The origin and distribution of this disc remain completely mysterious, with no clear chain of custody or verifiable source. The few people who claim to possess copies refuse to make them publicly available, citing concern for public safety and their own psychological well-being.
Let's now examine the Eternal Tuesday theory, which suggests that the SpongeBob universe exists in a closed temporal loop where time never actually progresses and characters are trapped in endless repetition of the same experiences without the ability to grow, change, or escape their predetermined roles. The evidence for this theory lies in the fundamental structure of the SpongeBob universe, where despite numerous episodes showing birthdays, holidays, and the passage of seasons, characters never age, never truly learn from their experiences, and never achieve lasting change in their relationships or circumstances. This suggests that time in Bikini Bottom operates according to different rules than normal temporal reality. The theory proposes that every episode of SpongeBob takes place during the same week, with time resetting at the end of each episode to return characters to their original states and relationships. This explains why SpongeBob never becomes a better driver despite countless lessons, why Mr. Krabs never achieves permanent financial security despite numerous windfalls, and why relationships between characters reset to baseline configurations regardless of what happens during individual episodes. Most disturbing is the theory's explanation for Squidward's increasing psychological deterioration throughout the series. According to this interpretation, Squidward is the only character who retains some awareness of the temporal loop, experiencing the psychological trauma of endless repetition while being powerless to break free or communicate his awareness to others. Squidward's depression and existential despair aren't just personality traits, they're the natural psychological response of a conscious being trapped in endless repetition of meaningless experiences. His attempts to escape his situation through art, music, or different employment always fail because the temporal loop resets his circumstances regardless of his efforts. The theory suggests that Squidward's increasing bitterness and hostility towards SpongeBob stems from his unconscious awareness that SpongeBob's cheerful ignorance helps maintain the temporal prison that traps them all. SpongeBob's refusal to acknowledge the meaninglessness of their repeated experiences makes him complicit in perpetuating the loop. The psychological horror of the Eternal Tuesday theory lies in its suggestion that consciousness itself may be a form of torture when trapped in unchanging circumstances. Squidward's awareness of the loop makes him the most tortured character in the series, as he alone understands that all his efforts and experiences are ultimately meaningless. This interpretation transforms every episode into a meditation on the nature of time, consciousness, and the psychological effects of eternal repetition. The show becomes a form of temporal horror where the greatest tragedy isn't death or suffering, but the inability to escape or change despite infinite opportunities to try. The broader implications of the Eternal Tuesday theory extend to questions about the nature of fiction itself, and whether fictional characters can be said to suffer if they're trapped in repetitive narratives. The theory suggests that our consumption of repetitive entertainment may be participating in a form of temporal torture that we don't recognize or acknowledge. Now let's examine the Lost Bible Pages theory, which suggests that SpongeBob SquarePants contains hidden theological messaging derived from apocryphal Christian texts that were supposedly discovered in sunken World War II submarines and used as inspiration for the show's deeper symbolic structure. This theory emerged from detailed analysis of the show's extensive use of nautical and Christian symbolism combined with the underwater setting that literally places all action beneath the surface of normal reality. Theorists have identified numerous biblical parallels and theological themes that suggest a deeper religious or spiritual purpose behind the show's creation. The theory proposes that Steven Hillenburg and other creators had access to lost or suppressed Christian texts that contained alternative accounts of biblical events and theological concepts. These texts supposedly provided the symbolic framework that underlies the show's seemingly innocent surface content. According to this interpretation, SpongeBob represents a Christ-like figure whose innocent suffering and endless forgiveness serve to redeem the other characters despite their moral failures. His ability to maintain hope and kindness in the face of constant rejection and abuse mirrors traditional Christian themes of sacrificial love and divine mercy. Squidward represents the skeptical intellectual who rejects spiritual truth in favor of worldly concerns, only to find himself trapped in existential despair as a result of his spiritual blindness. His artistic pretensions and cultural sophistication cannot provide the meaning and purpose that only spiritual connection can offer. Patrick embodies the concept of holy innocence, where apparent simplicity masks profound spiritual wisdom. His childlike approach to life and inability to understand complex worldly concerns reflect traditional Christian values of spiritual simplicity and trust in divine providence. Mr. Krabs represents the corrupting influence of material attachment and the spiritual dangers of placing worldly success above moral and spiritual considerations. His obsession with money serves as a warning about the incompatibility of spiritual and material priorities. The underwater setting becomes a metaphor for the submerged spiritual reality that exists beneath the surface of material existence. The character's ability to survive and thrive underwater represents the human soul's capacity to exist in spiritual dimensions that transcend normal physical limitations. The theory's most disturbing element involves the claim that the lost theological texts contained prophecies or warnings about the end times that are somehow encoded in SpongeBob's narrative structure. These prophecies supposedly predict global events and spiritual transformations that will fundamentally alter human existence. The hoax nature of this theory is openly acknowledged by its proponents, but what's disturbing is the reported psychological effect of creating and spreading the hoax. The person who originally created the Lost Bible Pages theory later claimed that the process of inventing the theological connections felt like channeling information from an external source rather than creative invention. This suggests that the act of analyzing SpongeBob for hidden meaning may itself be a form of spiritual or psychological experience that transcends normal interpretation. The theory becomes self-fulfilling as the process of looking for hidden meaning creates the very meaning that's being sought. Our final theory brings us to the ultimate boundary of SpongeBob analysis, the terrifying possibility that SpongeBob himself is not actually a sponge at all, but a cosmic entity of unknown origin and purpose that has taken the form of a sponge as a disguise or mimicry that allows it to interact with our reality without being recognized for what it truly is. The evidence for this theory lies in SpongeBob's impossible characteristics and abilities that cannot be explained by normal sponge biology or cartoon logic. His apparent immortality, his ability to function in multiple realities and dimensions, his immunity to physical and psychological trauma, and his capacity to adapt to any situation or environment suggest something far more sophisticated than a simple sea sponge. Most disturbing is SpongeBob's emotional and psychological consistency across all circumstances. While other characters show realistic responses to trauma, stress, and changing circumstances, SpongeBob maintains the same personality and emotional patterns regardless of what happens to him or around him. This suggests that his apparent emotions and reactions may be performed rather than genuine. The theory proposes that SpongeBob's cheerful demeanor and innocent behavior serve as a form of psychological camouflage that prevents others from recognizing his true nature. His exaggerated childlike qualities may be an imperfect attempt to mimic human emotional responses without truly understanding their underlying psychological mechanisms. SpongeBob's relationships with other characters take on a sinister quality when viewed through this lens. Rather than genuine friendships based on mutual affection and understanding, these relationships may represent a cosmic entity's attempts to study and understand human social behavior through direct observation and participation. The theory suggests that SpongeBob's presence in Bikini Bottom serves some unknown purpose that requires him to maintain his disguise while gradually learning about human nature and social structures. His apparent kindness and helpfulness may be calculated behaviors designed to gain trust and access rather than genuine expressions of care. Most terrifying is the implication that SpongeBob's cosmic nature makes him fundamentally unknowable and potentially dangerous in ways that cannot be predicted or understood. His true motivations, capabilities, and ultimate purpose remain completely hidden beneath his carefully constructed disguise. The theory's most disturbing element is its suggestion that SpongeBob's influence extends beyond the fictional world of Bikini Bottom to affect viewers in the real world. His cosmic nature may allow him to use the show as a form of communication or influence that operates through the act of viewing itself. This interpretation transforms every episode into a potential form of contact with an alien intelligence that's studying human behavior and psychology through entertainment media. SpongeBob's apparent innocence becomes a form of cosmic horror where the most dangerous entities are those that appear most harmless. The theory concludes with the terrifying possibility that SpongeBob's mimicry of sponge form is gradually becoming more accurate and convincing, suggesting that he's learning to better disguise his true nature through continued observation of human expectations and reactions. When we consider all the Level 9 theories together, the broadcast signal manipulation, the self-aware DVD, the temporal loop, the theological conspiracy, and the cosmic entity disguise, we arrive at a complete dissolution of the boundary between fiction and reality, between entertainment and genuine supernatural or cosmic horror. These theories suggest that SpongeBob SquarePants represents something that transcends normal categories of analysis and interpretation. Whether viewed as a form of mimetic entity, a breach in reality, a theological message, or a cosmic intelligence, the show becomes something that exists partially outside normal human understanding. The progression through all 9 levels of analysis represents a journey from surface observation to complete philosophical and ontological dissolution. What began as recognition of inappropriate content has evolved into confrontation with the fundamental nature of reality, consciousness, and existence itself. The psychological impact of fully embracing Level 9 theories is profound and potentially dangerous, as they challenge every assumption about the nature of reality and the relationship between fiction and truth. These theories invite madness not through their logical inconsistency, but through their implications about the nature of existence itself. The cultural significance of Level 9 content extends beyond entertainment criticism to encompass fundamental questions about the nature of reality, consciousness, and the relationship between human perception and objective truth. SpongeBob becomes a lens through which we can examine the most disturbing possibilities about the nature of existence. As we conclude our journey into Oblivion, it's important to recognize that Level 9 theories represent the absolute limit of analytical interpretation. Beyond this point lies only madness, dissolution, and the complete abandonment of rational thought in favor of pure philosophical and psychological horror. The transformation of innocent children's entertainment into cosmic horror and ontological nightmare represents one of the most dramatic interpretative journeys possible in cultural analysis. SpongeBob SquarePants has become a gateway to confronting the most disturbing possibilities about reality, consciousness, and existence. Whether these theories represent genuine insight into hidden truths or dangerous psychological projection remains impossible to determine. The act of analysis itself becomes a form of risk, where the search for meaning may create the very horror that's being discovered. What do you think about these ultimate theories that dissolve the boundary between fiction and reality? Do they represent the logical conclusion of deep analysis or dangerous descent into madness? Have you experienced any phenomena that might support or contradict these extreme interpretations? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more explorations of the absolute limits of cultural interpretation. This concludes our complete journey through all 9 levels of SpongeBob SquarePants analysis. We've traveled from innocent observation to the brink of madness, revealing possibilities and interpretations that challenge the fundamental nature of reality itself. The transformation of SpongeBob from simple cartoon to cosmic horror demonstrates the power of human interpretation and the dangers of pursuing meaning beyond the boundaries of rational thought. The ultimate level of analysis may not be discovery but dissolution, the complete abandonment of the distinction between observer and observed, between fiction and reality, between sanity and madness. Until next time, remember that some truths are too dangerous to know, some analyses too profound to survive, and some interpretations too extreme to maintain rational consciousness. The deepest level of any analysis may be the recognition that some things should remain unexamined, some meanings should stay hidden, and some truths should never be spoken. In the end, perhaps the greatest horror isn't what we discover in our analysis, but what discovers us in return. The abyss gazes also, and in level 9, the abyss has a face, yellow, square, and smiling with hollow eyes that see everything and understand nothing, or perhaps understand everything and see nothing. The distinction no longer matters. We have reached oblivion, and oblivion has reached us.